personally say hello to our online community. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Taylor and I am the Kids Director. And we wanted to tell you that we are jumping into a brand new series called Love, Sex, and Dating. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of relationships. So whether you are single, married, or dating, this is going to be an awesome series for you. We wanted to say thank you so much for sharing all of our stuff online, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. This is such an ongoing, growing community, and we're so excited about that. So in just a few seconds, we're going to invite the band to come out. Carrie, Lauren, and Parker are going to be leading us today, and it's going to be a really awesome opener, so stay tuned for that. Well, good morning, everybody. How you doing out there today? You guys good?
Working on it.
Awesome.
Coffee hasn't sunk in
That's
just
all right.
yet.
That's okay. Well, my name is Taylor, and this is Joe, and we are jumping into a brand new series called Love, Sex, and Dating. And it's going to be a really fun morning. And so if this is your first time, you wouldn't know this, but we try to make this a really engaging and fun opener. So
we usually like to start service off with a fun song, but since the topic today is love, sex, and dating, we were struggling trying to figure out what's like the right song to start with in the morning, right? Like what's the best love song?
What love song can we choose?
Yeah, there's so many, but when we thought about it, we realized what we were really doing is just overthinking the whole thing.
True.
Because every love song is super simple. You see, you may not know this, but every love song, I'm giving away secrets, is just 4 chords.
I didn't know that.
My friend Bryce is over here. Bryce, can you play the 4 chords that are in every love song? So you can kind of feel it, right?
Yeah.
You see, we're going to sing a few love songs. Is that okay with you? All right, we're going to hand it over to these guys. They got some fun songs for us.
Love is pure. I saw an angel, of that I'm sure, and I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait. I'm yours. If I could, then I would. I'll go wherever you will go.
Can you feel the love tonight?
And she will be loved. She will.
Standing by, waiting at your back door all this time. How could you not know?
Baby, 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 oh, baby, 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 oh.
Once upon a time I was falling in love. Now I'm only falling apart. When the man's a woman,
Wherever you are, oh. Say my name when no one is around you. Say, baby, I love you. Double time.
you're the meaning in my life. You're the inspiration. You bring feeling to my life. You're the inspiration. Everybody knows I'm in over my head, over my head. It's feeling anymore. I've forgotten what I started fighting for.
Take on me.
No woman, no cry.
Take me on.
No woman, no cry.
Be gone.
Every rose has its thorn.
Gonna take a lot to take me away
Just like if
from
cowboy
you.
sings last
Nothing
that
that
song.
happened, it's too
No
late
more
to
can I do.
apologize. It's too late. Sing ba 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 doo wop, diddy ba doo wop, ba doo.
If I were a boy,
Your love, how deep
I
is
think
your
I would
love?
understand. All the single ladies,
All the single ladies,
all my single ladies,
all the single ladies,
all my single ladies,
all the single ladies, now get your hands up. Any way you want it, that's the way you need it. Any way you want it. Uptown girl, she's been living in her white bread world. And I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more. tell everybody that this is your song. It may be quite simple, but now that it's done, it's done.
That is how I want to start off a Sunday morning. I don't know about you guys.
There's your coffee for you.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Well, welcome everybody. Like I said, my name is Taylor and this is my husband Joe. And if this is your first time, we just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Our mission statement is to see everyone transformed and mobilized by Jesus. So that is our heartbeat. That's why we do what we do around here. So we're going to be spending the next 70 minutes jumping into a brand new series called Love, Sex, and Dating.
Yeah, but before we do that, I want to draw your attention to the program here and a few things going on. We have some awesome things going on here at our campus, and the first one is actually happening this Wednesday.
Yes, it is Render. So we've been talking about this for the past couple of weeks. Render is going to be a night of worship. So if you like what we do up here, there's going to be more music. There's going to be a deeper Bible teaching. And it's just going to be a chance for us to grow in community with each other. We're going to be taking communion that night. It's going to be really awesome.
Yeah. And that's going on Wednesday. This weekend, actually, we have a really cool thing going on for our students. If you're a parent of a 6th through 12th grade student, we have our Wild Retreat, which is the one time a year where all of our students from every Kensington campus come together. We take over Spring Hill. It is an incredible weekend. If you're a parent of a 6th through 12th grader, it is my favorite thing we do here at Kensington for our students. And so if you want your student to be a part of that, we have a table in the lobby. We have scholarship money available to help send your student to go if that's an issue. And it's a really exciting time. And if you have 4th or 5th grade students, they have a retreat coming up in a couple weeks too. You can talk to Taylor in the lobby about that. But
November 10th through 12th for us.
Yes, November 10th through 12th. So that's an awesome thing. At this time, I'm going to invite our ushers to come forward. And we're going to take this morning's tithes and offering, and we just want to say thank you. If you call Kensington home and you are giving and you are contributing here, you are the reason why we were able to do so many awesome things. This weekend we had Treat Street over at Traverse Heights Elementary, which was a blast. We had a lot of fun.
Who was at Treat Street?
There was a few
Anybody
of us
at
there.
Treat Street?
Yeah, it was a great time. And by you helping out, you're contributing to the larger mission of Kensington. And so we just want to say thank you for doing that. And if you give online or through the app, you're with 70% of Kensington people who do that. And so that's another way for you to give. And one other thing that we have going on here at Kensington in just a couple of weeks is our marriage conference.
Yes, vertical marriage. So if you're not signed up and you are dating somebody, maybe you're in a serious relationship, you're married, or maybe you're like ready to pop the question.
Yeah, maybe this is like your
this
way
is an
of
awesome
taking it to the
conference
next
for
level.
you. Yeah. So we want you to go to vertical marriage. We're calling it a date night. So forget the conference word. We're calling it vertical marriage date night.
Right.
There's going to be music. There's going to be a full dinner. Childcare, what's up? So
it's cheaper than a babysitter when you really think about it. Like, we're covering you pretty well.
Yeah, and that's November 3rd from 6 to 9:30, so we want you guys to come hang out with us there too.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. And also today, with Vertical Marriage, we are starting a new series, and you probably got the hint from it. It's called Love, Sex, and Dating. And today, Patrick's going to be kicking off this kind of, like, let's all be honest. Like, everyone's a little anxious right now. Like, we can all admit
what
that.
Is going to be set up here?
Yeah, it's going to be great. But Patrick's going to talk today about the right person. And maybe some of you are looking for the right person. Maybe some of you think you found the right person. Patrick's going to talk about the idea, is that right person a myth? Or is there something more that we should be looking for or striving for? So I'm going to encourage you to get ready for today. It's going to be an awesome talk.
We're going to be doing speed dating after. I'm
No,
kidding.
we're not doing
I'm
that.
just kidding. Awesome. Well, hey, before we jump into that, guys, we're going to have you stand up, say hello to the people around you, give some handshakes, some high fives. And here's a question I want you to ask. What is your favorite love song? And I'll tell you mine, Taylor Swift, Love Story.
Tina is new to the area and is eager to find the man of her dreams.
My name is Tina. I'm a graphic designer from Dayton, Ohio. I'm 28 years old, single, and I just got out of a 2-year relationship. I have dated since the relationship ended, but they were all absolute nightmares. What I'm looking for is someone who is strong but has a sensitive side, loves to laugh and has the ability to make me laugh, but can hold an intelligent conversation as well. He has to be athletic with an artsy bent, a self-starter, but is chill at the same time, wants a family, but also values time alone with me. And, he has to be hot.
Tina is looking for a man between the age of 26 to 30, minimum salary of $100,000, and never been married. The only problem is, so is every other single woman.
I'm looking for a guy who makes me feel special and desired, someone I can be at ease with and be myself around. You know, the perfect guy.
Since most of the men in the area may not meet Tina's expectations, she may have to make do with just some touches of her preferred style. What she won't compromise on is that he must be intelligent.
He has to be smart and someone who can hang with me intellectually. It's like Kim Kardashian said, I feel my best when I'm all glammed up. She's right. That is when I feel my best.
A strong family background, great style, and good with finances rounds out Tina's list. Now she just needs to get her head wrapped around the idea that she will no longer be single at last.
Good morning, Tina. How are you?
Good.
Are you excited for this?
I am.
I think we have a lot of great options. We're very excited.
Awesome.
Let's go.
Okay. Oh, great curb appeal.
For sure.
What style would you call this?
I'd call this the corporate powerhouse.
I like the sound of that. I'm assuming it's a good salary?
Yes, listed at $175,000.
Oh, that's great. Look at the view from here. I could totally see myself snuggled up to that.
Absolutely.
What about family values?
Well, that's going to be one of the challenges. There'll be a lot of travel and long hours away from home.
Oh, bummer. But I still think it's definitely worth considering.
Let's look at another option.
Okay.
Now, this one I like to call the adventurer.
Well, again, good curb appeal. The exterior's telling me something of a sensitive side?
Absolutely. He can cry at the drop of a hat.
Ooh, that might be a little too sensitive.
Well, with a little creativity and elbow grease, that can be upgraded.
I'll have to think about it. Can he stand?
Absolutely.
Well, I like the height. Is he 6 feet?
6'3". He's the last one on the block.
Well, it's plenty of space. I mean, I could see myself here for a long time. It's definitely worth considering.
Let's look at some more options.
Okay.
So, what do you think?
Well, he looks really athletic. That's high on my list for sure.
I thought you might like this one. Come over here. I want to show you something.
Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself?
I don't know.
It's too tired.
That's so funny. What's his salary?
Well, that's also funny. He lists at $45,000.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's definitely under my budget.
Well, with a little bit of work, he could meet your hopes.
I don't know. I really wasn't looking for a fixer-upper.
Looking for a turnkey.
Yes. Oh, darn, he's so cute and funny. It's killing me.
Well, you definitely have a lot to think about.
Yeah, I do.
Shall we?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Tina has met 3 great candidates, but none of them meet her top 3 needs on her wish list.
I mean, this is really tough. Option 1 is exactly what I'm looking for in a salary. Option 2 is sensitive, and he's 6'3". And option 3 is funny and athletic. I mean, they're all things I want.
Tina has seen some fantastic options. Now she's ready to choose.
All right, what's it going to be? 1, 2, or 3?
I am going to keep looking.
What?
I'm sorry. I just don't see any of these options making me that happy.
I thought we covered everything on your list.
You did, and you did your best. I just am confident that Mr. Perfect is out there somewhere.
Okay, well, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Tina is going to continue her search. All of us at Spouse Hunters wish Tina the best in her continuing journey in finding Mr. Right.
right, now you got to be honest, fellas. You got to be honest too. How many of you are actually pretty engaged to figure out who she picked at the end? Right? How many of you feel guilty about that? Anybody else? Yeah. That's great. Well, welcome. My name is Patrick. I'm the lead pastor here, and we're so glad that you're joining us. And we also just want to say welcome to everybody watching online. Thank you for taking the time to watch this service as well. Today we're kicking off a brand new series called The New Rules of Love, Sex, and Dating. And so now we've said sex 3 times in the service, so everybody can breathe easier, right? And if you're here for the first time, or if somebody invited you and you feel a little bit uncomfortable, let me just tell you this. I promise whoever invited you feels more uncomfortable right now than you do, right? So that's okay. So we're just really glad that you're here. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about love. We're going to be talking about dating. For those of you who are married, I'm going to be specifically talking about you throughout the course of this series as well. And then we're going to spend really all of next week kind of talking about sexuality and sex within relationships and how we approach that. We'll be talking a little bit about that today as well. But to kick things off, right, when you see a video like that, there's something inside of a lot of us at some point or another that bought into an idea that there is a right person for us. In fact, we can say it this way, that most of us at some point in our lives are searching, and we're searching for this right person in our lives. And that's not your fault. You were kind of brought up to believe that way. Right, think about all of the Disney movies that you saw when you were a child. Do you remember this? All the Disney movies that you saw, there was always, this, incredible princess that was involved in it. And then all of a sudden there was the guy that was a part of this as well. But I want to take us to a little bit more of the adulthood kind of movies that we see just for a minute. Now to get you kind of ready for this, let's just breathe through these moments, right? You're going to have a little bit of soundtrack of this as well. You've got all these movies, and all these movies have a few things in common. You always have kind of the person that's involved in this. You have the person that is the right person that the guy is searching for. The other beautiful part about all of this as well is you typically have another guy, right? It's the other guy that's involved in this that, people are kind of discarded at some point. If you don't like Twilight, we'll get past that quick, right? Right, we have all these moments, you have all these movies that just pull at your heart emotionally, whether you are a guy or you're a female, and they're geared towards doing that. But I think one of the most powerful movies that a lot of us have seen that's extraordinarily deep involves this guy right here. Am I right? He's what every guy secretly kind of wishes he could do or could be, right? Adam Sandler's got more game than I have ever had. And I really wanted to fast forward to the next part about this clip. Because of the clip, the next guy goes, what the heck is wrong with that guy, right? But there's something inside of us that finds ourselves drawn to stories like that. And part of the reason that we find ourselves drawn to those stories is because we are looking at some point in our lives, oftentimes, for the right person. And the internal belief that a lot of us have pulled into our hearts and our lives is that if we can find the right person, that if at some point we can just, search out, if we can get on Tinder and just keep swiping until we find the perfect person, right? If we get online dating, we find them. If our mom, sets us up on a blind date and all of a sudden it's whatever that is, then all of a sudden everything will be right. There's this idea of being the right, or looking for the right person, trying to be the right person, understanding those kinds of things. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what it looks like to not only search for the right person, but to maybe take a slightly different and more healthy approach in our relationships. Now, over the next few minutes, too, if you are married, let me hear you real quick. If you're married, woot woot. There you go. Yeah, you are. Yeah, what's up? All right, so if you're married over the next few minutes, there are going to be moments where is he talking to singles or is he talking to me? And I'm talking to you. So if you're asking the question, I'm talking to you. And as we start to look through this, I'm going to be giving you some specific pointers. Now, where are my single people at in the room? I'm ready. What's up? Yeah, I hear you. Right, over the next few minutes, if you're single in the room, let me tell you this. If you're single in the room and you're like, hey, if you could just let me stand up and look around, that'd be great. I'm just going to tell you this over the next few minutes. I'm talking to you throughout the course of this, and the reason I'm talking to you is because I believe this with all my heart, right? If you apply what we talk about today, next week, and the next few weeks, you're going to experience a life that a lot of people don't ever get to experience, and I want you to be able to experience that life. Now, we're going to start with one primary tension that I think is extraordinarily important for all of us, whether we're married, single, empty nesters, we're kind of, wherever we are in that range, and that's this. That your present, right, the present will be your past, but it will be present in your future. Married people, am I right? Yeah, right? The present will be your past, but it will be present in your future.
Now, I remember my first girlfriend, I was in sixth grade. I think I was in sixth grade, yeah. Sixth grade, I asked her out. We never went anywhere, and we didn't really ever talk until the very end of our relationship. Now, this is funny. Until the very end of our relationship when she broke up with me, right? Now, in sixth grade, this was like devastating, right? I mean, it was like a big deal, even though we never talked, anything like that. We never went anywhere. When she broke up with me, it marked me, and here's what's so funny. It marked me going into my next relationship in middle school, right? Any middle school parents out there? Do you have any middle school parents, right? So you know what I'm talking about. When your daughter gets, dumped for the first time or she gets broken up with, there's something inside of every man that's like, like that sort of thing. It's a father. But then there's another part of this where you're looking at it going, I feel sad about what's happening because I know that she's going to carry that thing into the next relationship that she has one day. There's something about relationships that do that, right? The present will one day be your past, but it will be present in your future. Some of you, right, you had relationships in college, and the baggage that you have carried with you since that relationship made it into the next relationship, in the next relationship, and then all of a sudden maybe into your marriage, and you have insecurities that aren't even tied to your spouse. They're tied to that girl, they're tied to that guy who said that one thing in a relationship. Now, some of you, right, when it comes to sex, right, when it comes to sexuality, some of you experience a sexual relationship at some point in your life. Now, here's kind of what's interesting. You experience a sexual relationship maybe in college or maybe even in high school, maybe along those lines, or out of college, and then you broke up. And you can't explain why. You don't know why. But there's a part of you that feels like it was just like ripped out and it feels different than your other relationships. And all of a sudden now you're married. And you look at it, and that relationship that happened in the past, that sexual experience that happened in the past, all of a sudden it's carried into your marriage, and you don't even know why. You didn't even love her. You didn't even love him. It just happened, and all of a sudden now it's a part of your marriage, and you're trying to figure out how does that work. Now, because that statement is true, it lays the foundation for us to really process and think through. If our present will be our past, but it will be present in our future. The decisions that we make right now as people who are single, the decisions that we make right now as people who are married will shape the future that we experience, will shape the health of our relationships one day. And as long as you're continuing to pursue the right person, now for those of you who are married, we'll say it this way, right? As long as you are questioning whether you married the right person, as long as you have these moments where you wonder if they are the right person or did I make a mistake, you are going to find moments of angst in your heart and angst in your life. As long as you have subscribed to or taken the approach of going after the right person, you're going to find yourself with a level of unhealth in your life that God never designed you to have. And that's what we're talking about today with this specific title. We're saying, is really the right person myth, right? It's really the right person myth. It's not that there's this one right person out there for you as much as we like to believe that with every single movie that we've seen, right? It's not that one of my favorite movies, you're gonna judge me, fellas, I know. One of my favorite movies is Serendipity. Has anybody ever seen Serendipity, right? It's got I like it because of John Cusack. He's hilarious, right? And there's this whole idea throughout Serendipity, right? That the universe just kind of constantly brings two people together and then boom, and then they eat like some kind of cheesecake at the end and it's beautiful, right? The problem with that is as long as you're pursuing that, what we're doing is this. We're constantly looking outside of ourselves to find someone, but we're not necessarily looking inward. Now, the right person myth, especially in our country, kind of looks like this, right? You meet, and however it is that you meet, you come together. Maybe you meet on Tinder. Maybe you meet because you got a blind date set up. Maybe you saw her at a bar, and you're like, what's up, girl? What's your MySpace? Whatever that is, You wouldn't say that. That was 10 years ago. Does anybody even have a MySpace anymore, right? You look and you say, whatever that is, and you begin a relationship with somebody. You meet, and whatever your pickup line was perfect. It was like everything that Hitch wanted you to do. You did all of those things. And now all of a sudden you're in a relationship and you meet, and the beginning part of a relationship is just beautiful and flowers and I love you more. I like you more. You're everything I never knew I always wanted. Like that kind of stuff, And it's constant, and you meet. And the right person myth is going, I'm constantly looking outside. Is this person the right person? Am I finding the right person? Is this the right person? You meet, and then at some point you propose. And nowadays, you don't just propose, right? How many of you remember the days when you just proposed? Anybody remember that? How many of you just proposed? Now you have like a video crew that kind of sets up. You have your own hashtag for the proposal. I did it, right? You have all those moments. And now it's like this whole thing. Now you propose, and now you're getting married, and she's doing this a lot. Like that sort of thing, you know? And you move into the relationship. You're moving towards marriage, and the whole time, you would never probably say this out loud, but the question you're continuing to even wrestle through in terms of the health of your relationship is this the right person for me? And then you get married, right? And it's beautiful. And you have a hashtag for that as well. And you have Facebook pictures, and you have a photographer that costs a lot of money, and you have all of these things, and a preacher guy that shows up in a really nice suit. And you have all of these moments that lead you to marriage. And if you watch the movies, this is what's always fascinating me. When you watch the movies in these moments, they get married and typically the movie stops. You ever notice this? Or they finally get together, you know? Like, I love The Office. Anybody ever, we talked about The Office a few weeks ago. All right, Jim and Pam get together. There's one more season, maybe two more seasons where they're actually married. And that's one of the few shows that I've actually seen where it's like, oh no, there's marriage and there's stuff that happens after the wedding. And if you've been married for longer than, 3.5 minutes, you begin to realize that we buy into this. We buy into happily ever after, don't we? Now, the problem, though, is that if we've been along these lines of, is it the right person? I'm going to focus on the right person. And we focused outwardly, but neglected what's happening inwardly. What we find is this. We find unhappily ever after. Now, I'm a pastor, and so part of what I do is I get to meet with couples. I get to meet with people that are getting married. I get to meet with people after they've been married for a while. And part of the reason that this series is so important to us is because we just talk to people all the time. And what they say is this. They say, we are unhappily ever after. And every time I sit in a meeting, I'm not a counselor, so I don't really counsel much, but I'll sit there and try to like get them ready for counseling or whatever that is. Every time I do, almost every single time, I'll sit there, and the person says, they did, she did, he did. It was their fault. If they would not have, and then they say this. Almost inevitably, somebody says, we have marriage problems. Now, I'm a little bit of a smart aleck, and I shouldn't be, and I know I shouldn't be, but sometimes I am. And what I want to say is this. There is no such thing as a marriage problem. That's not really it. Like, marriage is what it is. Like, marriage problems would consist of trying to discover this, right? Like, this is a marriage problem. Marriage problems are, is it over or under? So real quick, where are my under people at? Let me hear you. Woot woot. I'm judging you so much. Where are my over people at? Oh, yeah. There's the Christians. Just kidding. All right, so there's this moment, like, this is a marriage problem. My wife and I dated for a little over 7 years, right? 7 years. We knew so much about each other. Then we got married, right? And then she discovered when we started living together that I wear my shoes in the house at all times. I don't take off my shoes. I just don't do it. I don't feel comfortable. I have perfect feet. They're perfect, right? They're better than your baby's bottom. Like, they're amazing feet. They really are. Now, here's what's fascinating about our marriage. That's a marriage problem. Because you're not supposed to walk around the house in footy pajamas and tennis shoes on. You don't do that. That's what I do. Now, partner that with this. Partner that with the moment that the only time I really do take off my shoes is when there's like amazing carpet that's thick. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I'm watching a movie and I rub my feet on the carpet. Does anybody else do that? No, okay. We'll talk about that later, right? I rub my feet on the carpet. Guess what my wife's biggest pet peeve is? That, right? Our first fight in marriage was about, if you don't stop doing that, I will kill you. Like, that was our first fight. That is a marriage problem. That is not what you are struggling with if you are unhappily ever after, right? That's not what you're struggling with. When you are unhappily ever after, what you're struggling with is this. You're struggling with people problems. People with problems who get married. That you brought your own set of baggage in. Your spouse brought their own set of baggage in. They brought their own daddy issues. You brought your own daddy issues. You brought your own insecurities. They brought their own insecurities. And what happens is, two people, they get married, they do this, they come, they join together, and then all of a sudden, and don't miss this, all of a sudden, at some point or another, their people problems and your people problems, they just begin to clash and it begins to explode. Every time I sit with a couple, it's not that they have marriage problems. It's that they have people problems that they need to work through. Now, the beauty in this is that there's a different approach that can actually help you work through some of those people problems long before you ever get married, but it requires you to take a different approach. And the different approach, we'll outline it like this. It's finding the right person versus becoming the right person. And that's a very different thing. Now, think about that for a second. You can spend the better part of your life trying to find the perfect person. That's what I love about the spouse hunters thing, right? Guys do the same thing. It's just a different set of things that they're looking for sometimes. But you can spend your better part of your life trying to find the right person. But here's the truth. Don't tweet me on this, right? Let's keep this between us. You are compatible with a lot of different kind of people. Like, there are millions of people in the world. But you're going to bring your junk to every single one of those people. Like, I talk to single people all the time, and there's like this image of who they are. In fact, I at one point had a student pastor said, make a big list of what you're looking for in a future spouse. And I did. It was 9 pages, right? And Emily's all of those things, And more. Oh, yeah, fuck you, the love song. She's going to kill me for saying that out loud. 9 pages long. And what was training my brain to do was think, how am I clear on who that right person is? But you know what nobody really ever told me when I was growing up? Is that you need to become the right person. Because finding the right person without first becoming the right person is a recipe for an unhappily ever after ending. You could find whatever that 9-page version is of your spouse. But if you haven't done the internal work of becoming someone, no misses. You're never going to be happy. You never will. And I would say that most married couples in the room would probably go, yeah, that's probably true. Those of you who are in the room, this is hard to talk about, but if you're divorced in the room, if you look back on those experiences, yes, they had all their junk, but you did too. And part of that was just this kind of thing. And it exploded. So I want to give you a question if you're single. I want to give you a question if you're married. And I want to guide really what we look at when it comes to the text this morning. And it's a question that I think if you're single, I think you need to take a picture of it or write it down and put it somewhere because you need to remind yourself of it. And if you're married, I believe even more so in some ways, that you need to write this question down and let it guide your decision making every single day. The first question is this. This is for the singles in the room. Oh, the single ladies. All right, here we go. I won't do that again. Are you who the person you are looking for is looking for? Now, this is based off of Andy Stanley's book, The New Rules of Love, Sex, and Dating. He wrote a great book on it. I would encourage everybody to read it. There's a question that he developed. Are you the person that you are looking for is looking for? It turns the focus from outwardly trying to just find somebody to inwardly focusing on who am I becoming? Am I becoming the right person? Now, married people, where you at? One more time. Woot, woot. Here's yours. Are you the spouse you wouldn't want to live without? That sounds like a country song. Are you the spouse that you wouldn't want to live without? Now, come on, fellas, be honest. Are you becoming the person that is irresistible to your wife? And I'm not just talking about sex. Are you the person that's irresistible to your wife? Women in the room, come on, who are married, wives. Are you the person who's irresistible to your husband and not just the physical stuff? But knowing him so deeply, knowing her so deeply, that you're the spouse you would never want to live without. Now, I get to do a lot of weddings. I actually did a wedding yesterday. It was a beautiful wedding. It was such a great thing. And I was thinking about this that morning as I was kind of prepping for it. when you look at the Bible, when you look at the writers, specifically the New Testament, even the Old Testament, you look at these writers. If you're going into the text looking for a how-to guide on how to find the right person, you don't really get anywhere, right? It's hard to figure out when it comes to text, how do I just find the right person? And even in marriage, you have Paul talking about mutual submission, which is a fantastic passage that you should look at and read. You have all these practical insights on some of that, but you don't really have, like, how do I get my spouse to just do and become who I want them to be? But when you flip the question and you begin to look inwardly, what you find through the text, really all of the Bible, are these stories and these poems and these narratives and these letters, specifically in the New Testament, where these writers talk about how you become who it is that God has called you to become. Now, I'm going to say something that's kind of fun and awkward for a pastor to say. You ready? But you don't become the person that you're looking for, right? And you don't become that spouse that you want to live without, you ready? Just because you prayed enough. You don't become that person just because you have no faith to do it. You don't stumble into becoming the right person. You intentionally choose to be there. You don't run into it accidentally. And one of the writers in the New Testament is a guy named Paul. Paul actually makes this list, and I want to give you some of this list today. And the list that Paul talks about is this list that gets read at so many weddings. It's this list that gets read out over and over and over again. But the beautiful part of it is when you pause long enough to look at the words that he uses, it begins to reframe and reshape the way that you approach your relationships and your marriage. And if you're single in the room, what I'm going to encourage you to do over these next few minutes is some of you need to get out your phone and you need to write these down in your notes app. Some of you actually need to write them. And then those of you who are married, those of us who are married, I think we need to look at this list as well. Some of you are going to want to take a picture. You can totally take a picture. It's a big screen, right? You can do that. But I want these words that Paul uses to be the catalyst by which you look at your relationships moving forward, because it takes practice and intentionality on your part, whether you're single or married, to begin to master some of these ideas. So here's what Paul said. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Here's what he kicks it off with. Love is patient. Now, I think about Brad Paisley's song, Waiting on a Woman. Anybody ever listened to that song before? Country fans, right? I love this. Because when Paul talks right off the bat about patience, here's the assumption that Paul makes. The assumption that Paul makes is there's going to be times in your relationship where you're frustrated at the individual that you're with, and you need to pause and wait at times. Now, some of you, that's for dinner, right? And that's okay. But others of you, it's waiting on them to adjust and or change and or come into some sort of understanding. That if you were to adjust your expectations in a way, if you're married, where you look at it and go, you know what? I'm going to intentionally choose patience and not be pushy. Fellas, I'm not going to try to fix it all the time. That I'm willing to pause and be patient in our relationships when it requires me to be patient. Now, those of you who are single and or dating and or engaged, I'm going to tell you one of the best things that you could ever look at in the person that you're considering, right? Is as you look at them, begin to look at them through the eyes of how patient are they specifically with their parents who frustrate them, right? How patient are they when they're sitting in the Wendy's line and they got their order right the 17th time, right? That's me, right? How many of you look out and say, you know what? I am actually a person who is intentionally choosing to be patient in my life. If you are single, I would tell you that this is a learned skill for most people, that you choose patience more than you stumble into patience. Patience says this, that I'm going to intentionally allow and know that there will be more time needed for either you to change or you to adjust or us to become what we need to become. And I'm going to love you intentionally through all of that. Love is patient. Here's the next one. Love is kind. It's considerate. Now, this is a tough one because it's really easy to be kind at the beginning of a dating relationship. It's really hard to be kind after 30 years of marriage sometime, isn't it? It's really hard to be kind when you know the person loves you unconditionally. They're going to be there tomorrow no matter what. It's really hard to be kind when they say that thing and they know your trigger, right? And then the trigger gets, And they know that they set you off, and you have to intentionally choose to be kind. Now, if you're single in the room, practicing kindness is, again, something that you practice. If you're single, I think one of the best things that you could do is allow yourself to be in stressful situations where you choose kindness. Just go sit at the DMV for a while, you know? Kidding. What does that look like for us to choose kindness? When you're looking for a spouse, when you're giving feedback to a spouse sometimes. One of the easiest areas, I think, to find this is when you go out and eat with waitresses or waiters, right? If you ever have a first date with a guy and he gets upset at the waitress and he gets angry about it, it's probably just be a first date, right? Not a last date. Because kindness is one of those things when life gets hard that if you haven't intentionally grown in and practiced, the ugly side or the opposite side of that will come out in one of the most painful and hurtful things in hurtful ways. And a lot of that lack of kindness, you can't take back. Now, some of you have different personality types in the room, right? Some of you bend one way or another. Some of you are really type A, like me, you know. And the kindness thing is just hard, and you're not even trying to be a jerk, you know. You just struggle with it sometimes. I would say if you find yourself in those scenarios, especially if you're single right now, you need to work and chisel off that part of your life and your heart to make sure that you are kind. Because when life gets hard, and marriage will be hard for you at times, you need to make sure that you have that skill set in place. Now, Paul gives these two things right off the bat about what love is. Love is kind, right? Love is patient. And then he gives but it does not do this. This is the fun part, especially at weddings. So you get all these love is patient, love is kind. It's it's love is not. It's whoa, you know? Here's what he says. It says, then comes a list of do nots. It does not envy, it does not boast, and it is not proud. Now, envy is a fascinating one because some of us bend towards an area where we get jealous of the people that are in our lives pretty easily. You just kind of bend that direction. You don't mean to. I didn't know I bent that direction, but one of my lifelong dreams is to work at a specific church in Atlanta called North Point. I loved it. What was interesting, though, is my wife worked there before I did. She's a much bigger deal than me, and she was working there before me. And I'll tell you how this kind of rooted itself out. So she was working in a department before I ever got there. And then they would contract me to come down. I'd drive 3 hours to go down and speak in their evening, services for middle school students. And we're talking on the phone one day, and they scheduled me to speak, and I want you to picture it. They have this massive board up, right, like where they have all the names of the speakers, all these different churches. And so we've been dating for a long time at that point. And she goes, yeah, and she's laughing about it. She goes, yeah, they put your name up, and they said Mr. Chenoweth. And that was her maiden name. And I hung up the phone, and I'm just kidding. And you know what I thought? I don't care about that. You know what I cared about? This is hard. That they thought my wife, or my one-day wife, would be a bigger deal than me, that she was a bigger deal. And you know what? She was a bigger deal than me. She is a bigger deal than me. But I remember sitting there going, it's like, you okay? Oh, I'm fine. When your spouse is laughing and you're silent, that sort of thing, Isn't that funny? This is envy. This is envy. We talk about envy in our relationship because it needs to be talked about. Because love is putting aside all of that crap and serving and loving and elevating the other person. You find this, I think, in dating when somebody's like a one-upper, right? Every story that you tell, it's like, oh, I was in the woods one time. Oh, that's a great story. I fought a bear one time. Like that sort of thing, That's when the envy thing really begins to come out. The other one is boast. Who do you talk most about? If you're on a date and the person just talks about themselves over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, that's a problem. Right? If they're boasting about that, you need to pay attention to it. The proud thing is difficult because I don't think that's just like the opposite of humility, especially when Paul talks about it in the Greek here. What Paul's talking about, I think, is this idea of acknowledging weakness. Some of you have been in a relationship for 6 months, a year, and you've never heard the other person, you've never heard the other person acknowledge weakness. You've never heard the other person go, I'm not great at, or I wish I could be better, or what could I be better at? You've never done that. That's a huge red flag if you're dating. Now, for those of you who are married, let me tell you this. Ready? I talk to guys, and I know women, experience this too, but it's just, I get the guy side of this sometimes, more than the girls. But fellas, if you're not opening up to your spouse about your weakness or what you struggle with, then you're missing so much margin for connection and intimacy. Now, it doesn't mean you have to say, I'm the worst person in the world. It's not that. But does she know what you're actually insecure about now? Does she know where you are currently in your struggles in your heart? Does she know when you are envying other people? You have to be willing to lay that stuff down and be vulnerable with other people. Now, the next part of the verse is probably my favorite part of the whole passage. Now, I'm a dork. The New Testament was written in Greek. I love the Greek word around this. I'm going to teach you a word, and then we're going to talk about it, and then we'll jump in. Here's what Paul says next after these do nots. He says, it does not dishonor others. Now, I love this. It does not dishonor others. Now, the word for dishonor in this section is a fascinating word, and Paul kind of turned it into high gear at this point. This is when it gets slightly offensive to his readers. It goes, whoa, what does this mean? And if I went onto college campuses today and I were to talk about this part, it would be offensive to a lot of people in the room. Now, here's what the word that Paul uses. I want to put this up here. This is the Greek word that Paul uses. He uses the word oshemeneo. Oshemeneo. Can we say that together on 3? 1, 2, 3. Oshemeneo. Let's say it one more time, as loud as you can. Married people outshine them. Go. 1, 2, 3. Oshemeneo. Right, it's great. Now, here's what he's talking about when he says this. He says, does not, right, it does not, love does not behave disgracefully, dishonorably, or indecently. Now, here's what's so fascinating about this, because I feel like Paul is almost writing directly to our culture. Some of you date, now come on, some of you date, and that's the goal, right? At the end of your first date, you have a goal, and it's very specific, and it has nothing to do with honoring the person that you're dating. Some of you, even in marriage, come on, some of you in marriage, you would never say this out loud, but you are constantly dishonoring your spouse in the words that you say and the way that you treat them. Now think about it. When Paul gets after this, he could have said a lot of things, but right in the middle, right when he wants to pack the big punch, he says, do not dishonor. It is not dishonoring to people. Now, fellas, come on. Some of you, again, this is like the goal for your relationship, and you focus on it, you focus it and focus on it. But here's what I say to every woman in the room who is single, right? The goal for you in a relationship, specifically dating, and the guys that you're dating, is to not wonder why he's trying to buy you another drink, right? The goal in the people that you date is to not to wonder what he wants at the end of the night. That's dishonoring. All right, fellas, we'll say this. I'm going to say it this way, and then I'll wrap this up. Here's what we could say. I want you to imagine this. Imagine if you lived your entire life in a way where you weren't a part of someone else's regret story. Imagine if every guy lived their life in a way where they weren't a part of a story that a woman sat around and told one day about a guy that she regretted being with. That's the standard that Paul's talking about. In marriage, now come on. Imagine if, as a husband, you weren't a part of the stories that will one day get told where they go, he was dishonoring to his spouse when she wasn't in the room. She was dishonoring to her spouse when he wasn't in the room. That honoring part, even though in so many other subcultures, it kind of feels weird if you put it outside the context of marriage, but within the context of marriage, you should be so honoring to your spouse that they feel elevated and they trust you 100% whether you're in the room or not. Now, come on, ladies, I'm going to tell you this, and this is like a secret, and most of you know this, I know, but it's hard to apply sometimes. If you treat him like a hero outside of the house and in every conversation that you have, he will probably rise to that more times than not. And if when he gets home, you elevate him and honor him in some of those ways, I'm just going to tell you, you assume the best, he's probably going to rise to those things. Fellas, if you treat your wife with the level of honor that Paul is talking about, come on, she will feel so much love and closeness and intimacy to you. She will. And if you're single in the room, come on. You can practice this now in the way that you honor the people in your life that are important. Because it takes practice and it takes discipline. And Paul continues on, he says this. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not continually focused on ourselves. The other side of this is it is not easily angered. It doesn't have a short fuse. And probably the most difficult part of the entire passage that he references is this. It keeps no record of wrongs. It doesn't have a list that pops up beside their name of, I love you, but, ... Or I remember that time, ... Or we're in a fight again. But do you remember 6 years ago when you said that thing about my mom? You know? She's your mother-in-law. You know? It doesn't keep a record of wrongs. None of this comes naturally to us. But it is all so important. Now, I'll let you finish reading the passage on your own. It's one of the best passages I think you could read in the whole New Testament. But Paul wraps it up by using these words that I think are so important. He says this. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man or when I became an adult, I put the ways of childhood behind me. You can continue to live your life with the idea that there's a right person and I'm only searching for the right person. Or you could choose to live your life focused on becoming that person if you're single. Say it like this. I'm going to put up the next one real quick. Become the person that you are looking for is looking for? Or will you become the spouse you wouldn't want to live without? Which one of those are you going to choose to do? Now, I wanted to give you some super practical things and just how I applied it. There's a lot of ways to apply this stuff, and I know that. But when I came across this principle, I think probably early high school, I started talking to a couple people that were really trying to help me process through what this looked like. And there were 3 things that I focused on that has helped me so much, and I'm so thankful that I did. So I want to share those with you. If you're single, these are important. If you're married, these are things that I still apply right now in our marriage or we work too. And the first one is this. I think when you're focused on becoming someone, you need a personal set of core values. A personal set of core values. Now, Stephen Covey talks a lot about this in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a great exercise when you rewind to the end of your life, and it's your funeral, so it's kind of morbid, but when you rewind, what are the things that you want people to say about you? Another way to ask this is, what do you want people to thank you for at the end of your life? Now, I was trying to remember, I think I was a freshman in college when I really started diving into this. And what I did, someone said, hey, I told them that I wanted to work on this. They let me have a cabin in the woods by myself as a freshman in college. I was like 19, maybe 20. And I literally got away for 3 days. And I wrote down on paper everything that I wanted people to say about me. And again, I'm an overachiever, anal, type A. It was like 100 and something things. I had like a massive list, right? I wanted to be everything, you know? But what I did is I began to whittle that down over and over and over again, as much as I could over that 3-day period. And over the course of 3 days, I got it to about 15 things. Over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks, I got it down to 7. And the 7 that I ended up with were tailored to what I felt like were blind spots or weaknesses in my personality or struggles that I would naturally have and that I needed to work through. One of those things that I wanted to be said about me was that I wanted people to say that I was approachable. A lot of you know I'm the most introverted individual. I talk about this all the time. I'm so introverted. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday. They introduced themselves to me at the wedding, and I was like, oh, you don't know what you're getting into, but let's do it, you know. And we had a conversation. They were great, and it was a good conversation, but I was like, oh, you know, I'm awkward. So, but I wanted to be approachable, and I had to work at that. And I worked hard at it. That was one of my core values. I'm going to tell you this. Before you get married, now imagine this. If every person that got married knew what their personal core values were, and they were working on that those were like the guardrails for their whole life, that if you bumped up against it, if you messed it up, right, then you felt the tension around it. Then all of a sudden you begin to discover, like, I'm becoming who it is that I want to be and that I need to be for you. That would change the whole game in terms of wedding. Now, I'll tell you, if you're married, I think you should do this if you're married. I think you should go off. You should carve out space to figure this out in your own marriage. Second thing is this, and I want to explain this a little bit. I think you need to have a vision for marriage. But what I'm specifically talking about is a vision for the way that you want your marriage to feel. Now, Emily and I didn't necessarily talk about this when we first started dating, but we both brought to our dating relationship ideas about how we wanted our relationship to feel. And so I'm just going to give you like a real-time example, like from 2 days ago, if that's all right. Now, we got into a discussion a few days ago that was mostly my fault. And it really was. And it was based on different expectations that we had. And I was mad. I was mad. I was frustrated. And I wasn't even frustrated at her. I was frustrated that I hadn't been able to solve it. And it wasn't great. And we have a toddler. He's about 1.5 years. And so we were feeling all this. And, and of course, we get in a big fight the week of a relationship series, right? Naturally. And so what we did is it kind of escalated in an evening. And then that evening, we got to the place emotionally where we felt like we could go to sleep, because that was a principle that we decided on early on. We didn't solve it, but we got to the place emotionally where we could go to sleep. And then the next day, our little guy got sick. And so I was frustrated. She was still frustrated, but we came together to take him to the urgent care, So we take him to the urgent care, and we're both still mad, We're both still mad. We're sitting there in the urgent care, and the doctor comes in. He's like the happy old doctor, what I'm talking about? Which makes all that worse. When somebody's happy and you're mad, it's like, I need you to calm the happy down, And she apologized first because she's amazing, and then I apologized. And then we wanted to go solve it, so we went to go get Mexican food, and we did that over queso, right? Now, here's what I'm so thankful for about our marriage, right? I'm trying to get emotional. I'm so thankful for this, because early on when we first started dating, we decided that we would get to the place emotionally that we weren't going to let it hang over. We'll be honest, we're going to be blunt, we're going to work on it, but we're not going to let it hang over emotionally. Which means there are times where we stay up late. And it's not even like solving. It's like, I want you to know I love you. Like that sort of thing. We should feel that, I think to this day, she could correct me on this, I don't think we've ever gone to bed, I could be wrong, without saying that and feeling it and meaning it. And that was a commitment we made early on. And it was before we said I love you. And I was saying stupid things like, I like you. Like that kind of stuff, But that was part of the vision for our marriage. We wanted to feel a certain way. And I'm so thankful that we did. It shapes the rest of what we've done. Now, the last one is this. And I want to talk about this for a second. Is I think everybody needs a mentor couple. You need people that are 1 step, 2 step, 5 steps, 10 steps further along than you to speak into your heart and your life. And you need this in every area of your life. You definitely need it when it comes to marriage. You need people that are further along than you. When we were engaged, I talked to people who were married for 1 year or 2 years to figure out those things. Right? I think if you have a mentor couple before you feel like you need a mentor couple, you're going to be much healthier in the ways that you approach things. You will. The great thing about Kensington is we actually have a ton of mentor couples here. There's some of them here. Bill and Debbie are here. Pat Lang's here. Mark and Kay Moonley are here. They're incredible. And they're here in times of crisis, but they're also here just to come alongside of you as married people, or as, coming alongside in those moments. You need that. If you're engaged, I think you need that. If you're dating, it's weird. I think you need somebody that you can talk to about some of that. You need to be able to approach that in a powerful way. And mentors help you see the things that you can't see. So, to wrap up our time together, I'm going to show you this, right? Again, the questions that we need to look at. Will you become the person that you are looking for as a single person? And if you're married, will you become the spouse that you wouldn't want to live without? So, here's what I want to do to wrap up our time, and it's going to be a little bit odd, but I'm just going to ask you to go with me. If you are married in the room, I'd love for you just to stand up for just a hot second. If you're married in the room, go ahead and stand up. If you're single, don't worry. I'll get to you in a second. Here's what I say to you if you're married. You came here and you probably thought it was a single series, and we're talking to a bunch of 15-year-olds about dating, right? And I get that. Everything we're talking about today is for you. The health of your marriage, the sustainability of your marriage, faithfulness in your marriage is going to be determined not by you fixing your spouse. It's going to be determined by you focusing inward and deciding to become someone. It's going to be you focused inwardly, saying, I'm going to selflessly love you with my whole heart. Some of you have kids. Your kids are learning about what it means to be married, not by what you say, but about how mommy and daddy go to bed at night and what that feels like, because they know. There's a lot of people in the room, too, that are single, right? That they look to you, and they don't talk about looking to you, but they look to you. You're a model for people. You need to focus on becoming that irresistible spouse. You can apply that cheesy line if you want, however you look at it. But you need to do the work of becoming the person that God has called you to be for the person that he's given you. Now, if you're single and you're seated, I'm not going to ask you to stand up. All right, but you go ahead and stand up. We'll all stand up. Let's go ahead and stand up. Singles, you stand up. Married people, stay standing too. Let's do that. Here's what I'm going to say to you. Sorry, I'll try not to get emotional on this one. Some of you are looking, and you've been looking for a long time. You're like, if I could just, or is he really out there, or is she really out there, and all that. And I'm going to tell you this. You can drown in those questions all day long. You can. A lot of people do. And you can stumble yourself into a marriage that felt like the right person and still find unhappily ever after. The greatest gift that you could give yourself and the future spouse that you have is in this season of singleness to focus inwardly and become someone. One of my favorite things about Emily is she knew who she was before we ever got in a relationship. And I love that. Become the person that you're looking for. But you can't do any of that, I don't believe, on your own. I'm a pastor, and you're like, this is the pastor thing to say, and I know it is, but I think you need to know what it's like to have grace, and you need to know what it's like to be empowered through Jesus. If you're not a follower of Jesus in the room, you can get a long way on your own for sure, but I think you need Christ to help you navigate some of those nuances and to shape your heart in powerful ways. So what we're going to do next is the band's going to come out. They're going to sing a song. What I want to ask you to do, though, is you're standing there, I'm going to ask you just for a moment, just to close your eyes for just a second. And as you're doing that, I want you to think specifically, if you're married in the room, what's that one or two or three areas that you need to adjust or you need to tweak or you need to change in your heart and in your life so that you can become that irresistible person to your spouse? And if you're single in the room, here's my question for you. What is that area of your life that you are currently ignoring? What is that area of your life that you're currently ignoring that you haven't been willing to dive into and focus on in terms of becoming someone? What is that area that you need to adjust or fix or dive into in your life? I want you to take just a moment. I want you to think about that. And then I'm going to pray for us. Father, every single one of us in the room have things that we need to focus on and work on. Every single one of us, whether we're married, single, every single one of us in the room has things that we need to adjust. And God, I know that when it comes to our lives, we can't do this on our own. We need you. But I pray for the person in the room who maybe doesn't know you or is not a follower of you yet. God, I just ask that, God, I pray that you be with them as they take steps towards working this out in their own heart, in their own life, that you give them clarity and that you would help them to step out in faith and really work on their heart and choose to become someone. I pray for those people in the room who are followers of you. God, I ask that you would help us to work as hard as we possibly can to become the person that you called us to be, but at the same time, in faith, trust you to do what only you can do in our hearts, in our lives. Help us to be dependent on you and rely on you. God, in these next few moments, as Carrie and the band lead us in this song, God, remind us that it's only through you that we can find the fulfillment that you've called us to have and become the men and the women that you've called us to be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
You're my constant in the chaos. You're my compass when the road is long. You're my portion, never failing. center, should I wander? You're my future, and you've redeemed my past, every moment, and then forever. For me, only Jesus. For me, only Jesus. And my heart wants for nothing but you, just you. And my heart wants for nothing but you, just you. The riches of this world could never satisfy. And my heart wants for only you. And my heart wants for only you. For me, only Jesus. 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 For me, let my heart want for nothing but you, just you. Let my heart want for nothing but you, just you. The riches of this world could never satisfy. Let my heart want for only you. Let my heart want for nothing but you, just you. Let my heart want for nothing but you, just you. The riches of this world could never satisfy. Let my heart want for only you, oh Jesus. Let my heart want for only you. You can have it all, Lord. Every part of my world. Take this life and breathe on this heart that is now yours. You can have it all, Lord. Every part of my world. Take this life and breathe on this heart that is now yours. Oh, the joy I found surrendering my crowns at the feet of the King, who surrendered everything. Oh, the peace that comes
say two quick things before we leave. Some of you in the room, and you're single, and we've been talking a lot specifically to you today. And you're like, I have all this angst that I'm feeling about it, and I just want to talk to somebody about it. We're going to have a group that's actually going to be in the lobby that would love to connect with you and talk to you about all that we've talked about today. And then also, when you do a topic like this, there's all sorts of questions like, we pose one question, there's probably 20 questions that you kind of have on top of that. And so throughout the week on our Facebook page, over the next 3 weeks, we're going to answer some of those questions that you have. And so you can send those in to us on Facebook. We'd love to answer those. But also, we're going to do our best just to kind of, talk through some of the conversations that we have with you and try to answer those on the front end as well. So you can check that out on Facebook. And those of you who are married and you're like, you know what, maybe we're in a rough patch, or maybe we feel like we're heading toward a rough patch, or maybe we just need some of those mentors that you were talking about. All of our marriage mentors are actually going to be out in the lobby. They would love to connect with you. So you can find all of them right out in the lobby today. They would love to meet with you, talk to you. And they're also going to be at our vertical marriage event that's coming up as well. So it's date night. As Joe and Taylor said, if you got kids, it's free childcare. So that's cheap anyway. So you're great. So come to that. There's food. It's going to be a great night, so we would love to invite you to that as well. And the last thing is next week, again, we're going to be talking about sex in church, and so it's going to be the most non-awkward sex conversation you've ever had in church. So it'll be great. So we would love for you to come back and invite somebody with you to be a part of that, because we all know somebody who needs to hear that conversation. So we'd love for you to join us next week for that. Again, thank you so much for being here, and we will see you right back here next Sunday for part 2 of the new rules of love, sex, and dating. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.
And to our online community, we want to say thank you guys so much for watching. But hey, before you take off, I thought it would be fun to snag Patrick and ask him a couple questions.
Yeah.
So, hey, I thought pertaining to this lesson, I had a few questions for you. And number one is, for a single person who wants to take you up on choosing their personal core values, what would you recommend that they start with?
That's a great question. So I love this. This is one of my favorite things that I think I've ever done for my own development, spiritual development, personal development, and even relational development that I've ever done. I would think for you, if you're wanting to take that first step of figuring that out, you could read the part in Stephen Covey's book. It's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But if you want to fast forward that, really the question you're asking is if I begin with the end in mind, if I fast forward really to my funeral, what do I want people to say about me? I think you need to get away from people, get away from technology, and just spend some time focusing on that. And I think if you do that, at least my experience, I came up with a lot, and then it took me about 3 weeks, really in my quiet times or my devotional time, to really kind of hash out some of those things specific to your personality. So I think a great part of that is figuring out feedback, what are the blind spots that you have, and then really tailoring those words to be the guardrails for your life. But I think you got to get away first to do that.
That's awesome. The second question we have for you is, once a couple is dating or they're married, how do you monitor what and who you're becoming?
Right. How do you do that when you're married? Because you're talking about each other all the time, right?
That's really good.
That's really good. So, one thing my wife and I did when we were engaged, we were living in Atlanta. If you've ever driven in Atlanta, the traffic is crazy. And so she had an hour-and-a-half commute. I had about a 45-minute commute.
Okay.
And so we were seeing each other, just not a lot.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to figure out, I wanted her to tell me what I needed to work on. I think she was asking for the same thing. And so
those are hard questions.
It's a hard question. It is. And so, but what we did is every night of the week, we just said we're going to do it. And we did it over frozen yogurt, right? We did it over frozen yogurt. And we just got together one night.
So you turned it into a date.
We did, yeah. She calls it a date. I call it a meeting, but she's right on that. So
that's awesome.
And so I think one question that's completely shaped our marriage, even now, we do this now. Every phase it's been different. Now we try to do breakfast. But the question that I ask her, she asked me, is what's one area that I could serve you in this week? And sometimes, for me, one time I asked her something like, could you design Think? That's a weird thing. She's a graphic designer.
Could you just allow me to sleep?
Could you allow me to sleep?
Could I sleep and you get up with the kid this week?
Right. That's one of ours right now. So we do that, and then one of my favorites. I think I can say this. We're broadcasting. Well, we'll see. It's part about being on community. She was like, I want a back rub that doesn't lead to anything. I'm like, that's a great one. I can do that one, right? So we went there. It's love, sex, and dating. That's one of the questions. So asking each other, how can I serve you?
Yeah.
That's completely shaped that, and I think that's going to illuminate in your own life what you need to be focused on. So,
cool. I got one more for you.
One more.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so you talked a lot about dishonoring and what the Bible says about dishonoring. What advice would you give to a person who wants to shift away from that type of dating?
Right. And so, fellas, I want to talk to you specifically, right? Some of you, that's your goal. I think I said that in the talk. That's your goal for the end of a date. And so here's what I say. If you've been sexually active, and this is a hard thing to hear from me, but if you've been sexually active, or if you're in a relationship where you're doing that, and it's, that's kind of been your goal or your approach to dating, and not honoring the person that you're with, I think you need to take some time off. And it's not because I don't think you need to date, and it's not that I don't think you need to end up with somebody, but taking time off is going to help reset your mind and reset your heart to be prepared to do what you need to do moving forward, and really to help you become who you want to become. And so if you found yourself dating in a way that's dishonoring to someone else, I think women struggle with this too, but I think if that's where you find yourself, hitting the reset button for an amount of time is going to help you better be able to do that. And then I would say this: you don't date people that are going to allow you to dishonor them. If you're mean, you know where you meet those people. You know where that works.
You think it would be obvious, but it's
right.
not all
Sometimes
the time.
it's not. Yeah. And so I think the minute those red flags start going up, I think you just kind of say, hey, I'm going to press pause, and maybe it's not a not right now thing, or maybe it's not a future thing, but just kind of navigating that. And then I would say, if that's you, last thing, next week we're talking really all about that question. Next week we're really diving into that specifically for how we approach sex in a healthy way and really get up to the spiritual side of that. So I'm really excited. So you join us next week.
Hey, thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks
That's
so much.
awesome. Thank you,
thanks
guys.
for watching. Bye.
Hey, and thank you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in with us. Remember to follow, share, and all of that stuff on our social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We thank you guys so much. We will see you next week. What's going on, online community? My name is Taylor Leal, and I am the kids director here. Hey, we are jumping into a brand new series called Love, Sex, and Dating. This is week 1, and so we have a really awesome day planned out for you. In just a few minutes, we're going to invite the band out, but first we wanted to say thank you so much for sharing all of our stuff online. Thanks for being a part of this growing community online on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. So thanks for joining us. We're going to invite Carrie, Lauren, Parker, and the band to come on out. We have a really awesome opener for you this morning, so enjoy this. What's that? Well, hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? You guys all right this morning? Are you awake?
I think they're getting there.
You getting there?
Yeah.
You guys need to be louder than the 9 o'clock crowd because they were pretty loud,
They
actually.
were okay. Yeah, they're all right. I'll give them that.
Well, if this is your first time here, you might not know this, but we try really hard to have an engaging and a fun element at the beginning of our service. So we're jumping into a brand new series called Love, Sex, and Dating, and we are trying to figure out what song would go well.
The wheels
with
are
this.
turning for some people.
I know, everybody's like, wait a second, should I
What are
leave
they
or
gonna
should
do?
I stay?
Yeah, because there's so many love songs out there, and if you know anything about music, you would know that most love songs follow a similar pattern. And actually, musically, Bryce back here, he's a music expert. Bryce, don't all love songs most love songs have 4 major chords? They all kind of sound the same. Let's hear what these chords
Yeah,
are.
they do.
Just picture it. You feel it? You see, it's kind of there. Do you mind if we sing some of our favorite love songs with you today? We're going to do it. I'm going to hand it over to these guys.
Give
We're
it
going
up
to
for
have
the
some fun
band.
this
Here we
morning.
go.
My life is brilliant, my love is pure. I saw an angel, of that I'm sure. And I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait, I'm yours. If I could, then I would. I'll go wherever you will go.
Can you feel the love tonight?
And she will be loved. She will be loved.
Standing by, waiting at your back door all this time. How could you not know?
Baby, baby, baby.
Ooh,
Baby, 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 oh. name, say my name. When no one is around you, say, baby, I love you. Double time.
You're the meaning in my life, you're the inspiration. You bring feeling to my life, you're the inspiration. Everybody knows I'm in over my head, over my head. Can't fight this feeling anymore. I've forgotten what I started fighting for.
Take on me.
No woman, no cry.
Take me on.
No woman, no cry.
Be gone in a day or two.
Every rose has its thorn. It'll take a lot to take me away from you. Cause nothing like a minute more could ever do.
It's too late, my child. Sing bop, 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 doo wop, diddy ba doo wop, bop, bop, doo.
If I were a boy,
How deep is your love? How deep
I
is
think
your
I would
love?
understand.
All my single ladies, all the single ladies, all my single ladies, all the single ladies, all my single ladies, all the single ladies. Now put your hands up. Any way you want it, that's the way you need it. Any way you want it. Uptown girl, she's been living in her white bread world. And that I would walk 500 miles, and that I would walk 500 more. You can tell everybody that this is your song. It may be quite simple, but now that it's done, it's done. It's done.
Awesome. Wow, give these guys a big round of applause. Aren't they awesome?
I don't know about you. That's how I want to start my Sunday morning.
Right?
That's so awesome. Yes. Well, welcome again, you guys. For those of you who don't know, my name is Taylor, and this is my husband, Joe, and we're so glad that you're joining us today. If this is your first time, we do want to give you a special welcome and say thanks for joining us. You are actually part of a series that we're jumping into called Love, Sex, and Dating. We here at Kensington, we believe our mission statement is to see everyone transformed and mobilized by Jesus. So that's the heartbeat around why we do what we do. And so we're going to jump into a message today for about 70 minutes.
Yeah, about that. But before we do that, I want to draw your attention to your program that you were handed when you came in. We have some awesome things going on here around Kensington this week and coming up, and we just want to highlight a few of them. The first one is something that is actually happening on Wednesday night we're really excited about.
Yeah, so what's happening on Wednesday is Render. We've been talking about it for the past couple of weeks. So Render is going to be a time for us to worship a little bit more. So if you like what's going on here, we're going to just do more of that in an environment here at our Traverse City campus. There's going to be an awesome message where we can dig a little bit deeper, grow in a little bit more of a community together. Yeah, it's going to be a really awesome night. So
that's happening this Wednesday,
October 25th. 7 o'clock.
Yes. And one thing that I'm really excited about is I'm our student ministries director here, so I work with our 6th through 12th grade students, and this Friday night we have our Wild Retreat, which is going to be wild. And so if you're a parent of a middle school or high school student and you want to send them to an amazing weekend with hundreds of other middle school and high school students from across Kensington, this is the weekend to do it. It's my favorite weekend of the year. If you need help, we have scholarship money. We want to make sure that every student here at Traverse City is there for this weekend. It's incredible. And if you're a parent of even a 4th or 5th grade student,
we're going on our first retreat.
Yeah, we have our first retreat coming up November 10th?
10th through 12th.
Yes, and so if you're a parent of 4th through 12th graders, we have something coming up for them. And at this moment, I want to invite our ushers to come forward, and we're going to take this morning's offering. And this is something that we are so lucky and get a chance to do, because here at Kensington, we are part of so many things. And by giving, if you call Kensington home and this is where you believe and you believe in what we're doing, that's what we're giving to right now. We had an event this weekend, Treat Street at Traverse Heights. Who here went to Treat Street?
Did anybody go to Treat Street? Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, we had a blast to come alongside our school partners and just put on a super fun night. And so when we give to things like that. We give to things that are happening all across our local campus, but also our global campus as well. So thank you so much for trusting us and giving and being a part of what we're doing here at Kensington. And we have one more thing that Tim is going to tell you about coming up in November that we're also excited about.
Yes, November 3rd, whether you are dating and maybe you're in a serious relationship or you are married, we want to invite you to our Vertical Marriage Conference. And so, actually, we don't even want to call it a conference. We want to call it a date night because we're setting you up for a really awesome date. We're going to have a really nice meal for you. There's going to be childcare.
Yeah, if anything else, I don't think
send the kids off, and it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I don't think you can get childcare for as much as we're costing for the whole thing, right? Like,
no.
it's an inexpensive night for you to come out with maybe your spouse, your girlfriend, your wannabe
maybe
girlfriend.
Maybe this is the night you want to propose.
Yeah, maybe
I don't know.
We can organize that for you. We do surprise proposals all the time. No, but it's just a fun night coming up, November 3rd. Put it on your calendar. It's going to be an amazing night to build into marriages, future marriages, and so many things going on. Before we kind of dive into today, like Taylor said earlier, we are starting a brand new series called Love, Sex, and Dating. Yes, we've said sex like 4 times already. It's probably uncomfortable. Like, let's just all...
And then after this, we're going to do some speed dating.
No, we're not doing speed dating today.
No, that's a joke. We're not going to do that.
But Patrick is going to kick off this series talking about the idea of the right person. Is there a right person? Are you the right person? Are you supposed to be the right person? Where can I find the right person? All of these things Patrick's going to talk about today, or maybe, in fact, there's a myth about the right person. So we're going to talk about all of that today.
That's true. But before we do that, we're going to have you guys stand up, say hello to the people around you, shake hands, give out some high fives. And I want you guys to ask people around you, what is your favorite love song? I'll tell you, mine is Love Story by Taylor Swift.
Tina is new to the area and is eager to find the man of her dreams.
My name is Tina. I'm a graphic designer from Dayton, Ohio. I'm 28 years old, single, and I just got out of a 2-year relationship. I have dated since the relationship ended, but they were all absolute nightmares. What I'm looking for is someone who is strong but has a sensitive side, loves to laugh and has the ability to make me laugh, but can hold an intelligent conversation as well. He has to be athletic with an artsy bent, a self-starter, but is chill at the same time, wants a family, but also values time alone with me. And, he has to be hot.
Tina is looking for a man between the age of 26 to 30, minimum salary of $100,000, and never been married. The only problem is, so is every other single woman.
I'm looking for a guy who makes me feel special and desired, someone I can be at ease with and be myself around, the perfect guy.
Since most of the men in the area may not meet Tina's expectations, she may have to make do with just some touches of her preferred style. What she won't compromise on is that he must be intelligent.
He has to be smart and someone who can hang with me intellectually. It's like Kim Kardashian said, I feel my best when I'm all glammed up. She's right. That is when I feel my best.
A strong family background, great style, and good with finances rounds out Tina's list. Now she just needs to get her head wrapped around the idea that she will no longer be single at last.
Good morning, Tina. How are you?
Good.
Are you excited for this?
I am.
I think we have a lot of great options. We're very excited.
Awesome.
Let's go.
Okay. Oh, great curb appeal.
For sure.
What style would you call this?
I'd call this the corporate powerhouse.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. I'm assuming it's a good salary?
Yes, listed at $175,000.
Oh, that's great. Look at the view from here. I could totally see myself snuggled up to that.
Absolutely.
What about family values?
Well, that's going to be one of the challenges. There'll be a lot of travel and long hours away from home.
Bummer. But I still think it's definitely worth considering.
Let's look at another option.
Okay.
Now, this one I like to call the adventurer.
Again, good curb appeal. The exterior is telling me something of a sensitive side?
Absolutely. He can cry at the drop of a hat.
Ooh, that might be a little too sensitive.
Well, with a little creativity and elbow grease, that can be upgraded.
I'll have to think about it. Can he stand?
Absolutely.
Well, I like the height. He's 6 feet?
6'3". He's the last one on the block.
Well, it's plenty of space. I mean, I could see myself here for a long time. It's definitely worth considering.
Let's look at some more options.
Okay.
So, what do you think?
Well, he looks really athletic. That's high on my list for sure.
I thought you might like this one. Come over here. I want to show you something.
Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself?
I don't know.
It's too tired.
That's so funny. What's the salary?
Well, that's also funny. He lists at $45,000.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's definitely under my budget.
Well, with a little bit of work, he could meet your hopes.
I don't know. I really wasn't looking for a fixer-upper.
Looking for a turnkey.
Yes. Darn, he's so cute and funny. It's killing me.
Well, you definitely have a lot to think about.
Yeah, I do.
Shall we?
Okay.
Tina has met 3 great candidates, but none of them meet her top 3 needs on her wish list.
I mean, this is really tough. Option 1 is exactly what I'm looking for in a salary. Option 2 is sensitive, and he's 6'3". And option 3 is funny and athletic. I mean, they're all things I want.
Tina has seen some fantastic options. Now she's ready to choose.
All right, what's it going to be? 1, 2, or 3?
I am going to keep looking.
What?
I'm sorry. I just don't see any of these options making me that happy.
I thought we covered everything on your list.
You did, and you did your best. I just am confident that Mr. Perfect is out there somewhere.
Okay, well, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Tina is going to continue her search. All of us at Spouse Hunters wish Tina the best in her continuing journey in finding Mr. Right.
All right, so be honest. How many of you were actually engaged to figure out what she was going to choose at the end? Anybody out there? Yeah? How many of you feel guilty about caring that much? Anybody else? Yeah, you do. Hey, welcome. My name is Patrick. I'm the lead pastor here, and we are so glad that you are with us this morning. Today, we're kicking off a brand new series called The New Rules for Love, Sex, and Dating. And as Joe and Taylor said, I think that's time number 7 that we've said sex in church. And so if you feel uncomfortable and it's your first time, I promise you, whoever brought you feels infinitely more uncomfortable than you do, right? So that's totally fine, but we're so glad you're here. Over the course of this next series, what we're going to be doing is we're really going to be talking about relationships. We're going to talk about love. We're going to talk a lot about marriage. And so for those of you who are married in the room and you're like, I thought this was a high school series, it's not. We're talking to you. And if at any point during the day you're like, is he just talking to the single people? I'm not. If you're asking the question, I'm talking to you too, right? So we're going to be doing that today, and it's going to be a great day. And then I also just wanted to say to everybody watching online, thanks so much for watching today. And if you're here, the way that we do our series is we actually spread them out over the course of a month. So it's a lot like a Netflix kind of binge watching sort of thing. So you can watch all of our series online. You can pick up if you miss a week and that sort of thing. But we're so excited about this series. Now, we watched the Spouse Hunters video, and there's something about that that rings true for a lot of us, isn't it? Right? Now, whether you actually look for the right person in that kind of way, most of us at some point or another were brought up from the time that we were little kids that there is a Prince Charming or there is a right person, and that right person is out there somewhere. Do we have any Disney fans in here? Any, like, you liked Disney back in the day? Any Aladdin, right? Aladdin was my jam. So even from the time that you're watching these Disney movies, Cinderella, right, with the beauty Beauty and the Beast, all these sorts of things. The idea that's perpetuated from the time that you're a kid is that somewhere out there is the right person. In fact, let's just put it up here. The way that we approach it is this, that there is a person and that person is right, but not only are they are right for us. And that's a way of thinking that we were growing up on. But it's not just for when we were kids, right? Now, I want you to take a minute. Everybody take a big deep breath. Let it out. We're going to look at some chick flicks just for the next few moments. So guys, stick with me. And you're like, I was just starting to like this place. Just stick with me. All right, here we go. All right, so let's put some of these up there. We even give you some music. How many of you have seen any of these movies? Remember Titanic, right? Titanic happened. There's all these sorts of movies. And all of these movies have something that's in common. Right? All of these movies have this thing that's in common with them, where there is someone who is the right person. Typically, there's the pursuer. And in most chick flicks, which is always fun for me, there's always the other guy who's just not quite good enough, right? Like in The Notebook, do we know what we're talking about, right? And then if you don't like Twilight, just pretend that didn't happen. All right, so, right? And so there's all these movies and these moments where there's the right person that's out there, and if I just keep pursuing them, if I just keep looking, then one day they are going to show up. Now, my favorite person in a chick flick movie, let's just go ahead and show you this real quick. Right? Adam Sandler has all of the things that every single guy wants just a little bit of. He's got the funniness. He's got the hair. Am I right on the hair, right? He's got all these things, and he gets the girl. Now, my favorite part that we did not include in the clip is that as soon as he gets done playing that, there's a guy that looks right next to the girl, and he's like, hey, who the heck is that guy, right? There's this moment when it comes to these things where we just kind of are drawn to this idea of the right person. We're constantly looking outward. We're constantly looking out there. And if we can just figure out how to find them, right? If we can just keep swiping on Tinder, then eventually we will come across them. Am I right? If we just keep looking on Facebook, if you fill out your Match.com thing just right with just the right picture, whatever that is, you know, I'm walking on a beach. Now, whatever that is, then all of a sudden you're going to stumble across the right person. Now, I don't know for sure if there's like a perfect right person for everybody. My gut tells me probably not, right? Like at the end of the day, when I think about you, when I think about me, you are probably compatible with lots of people, right? I mean, there's millions of people in the world, and it's great that you found whoever it is that you found, but there's something inside of you that could probably connect with lots of different people. This idea of pursuing the one, pursuing the right person, is kind of difficult to get our minds around and fully grasp when we really think about it. Now, today we're going to base a few things off of a particular idea that's going to really kind of propel us into the text that we're going to look at. Now, before we do that, I want to go ahead and just kind of make sure that I have a grasp on everybody in the room. So let me ask you this. If you are not married in the room or you are single, let me hear you go woot woot real quick. 1, 2, 3. There you go. I'm on the prowl. That's all right. Go ahead. So you're out there. Now, if you are married in the room, let me hear you real quick. 1, 2, 3. You okay? Yay. Saturday night, party. All right. So that's kind of where we're at. So here's what we're going to look at. Whether you're married or you're single or you're dating or you're engaged, even if you're divorced in the room and now, you're looking and you're like, I've sworn off the opposite sex altogether. We're going to talk a few minutes specifically around this principle. And if you're married, I'm going to need a shout out if you believe this is true. That the present will be your past, but it will be present in your future. Married people, am I right? Yeah, I'm right. You know it. Right. So the present will be your past, but it will be present in your future. Now, here's what I mean by that. When I was in 6th grade, I had my first dating relationship, right? And that meant that I asked a girl out, but we didn't go anywhere, and we didn't even talk, right? But we were going out, right? And we started going out. She passed me notes back in the day where you did gel pens. Anybody remember gel pens? Yeah. Don't judge me. All right. So we had that whole thing. She's passing notes. No, we never actually talked. We dated for about a month and a half, something like that. I don't know. And then she broke up with me, right? And it was devastating because puppy love is real to puppies. You know what I'm talking about? And so she broke up with me. Now, here's what happened. It unleashed this level of insecurity in me as a middle schooler that I then carried with me into my next relationship where I went out with somebody that I didn't talk to or go anywhere with. But it followed me into the next relationship. And then whatever baggage that I got from that relationship that I didn't deal with, all of a sudden followed me into my next relationship, which happened in college. I'm just kidding, right? So there was a gap between the two. And then all of a sudden, that baggage kind of followed me and followed me and followed me on. That's kind of how it works. Do we have any parents of middle school girls in the room? Parents of middle school girls, where are you at? Yes, let's pray. God, I'm just kidding. So, right, if you're a parent of a middle school girl in the room, you know this. Because if her heart ever gets broken by one of those guys, fathers, there's something in the room that makes you go, ooh, you know what I mean? Like, you're ready to go to town on that guy. But there's also something inside of you where your heart breaks for that middle school girl. Why? It's not because she's just sad right now. It's because whatever she's feeling in that moment might follow her into the next moment. And part of shaping the heart of a middle school girl is getting after the identity that you are not what he said that you are. You are not what he views you as, and you're kind of working against this gravitational pull that follows them in relationship after relationship after relationship. Now, this is broader than middle school. Some of you made decisions in college, right? And you made a decision in college in a relationship, and it followed you not only into the next relationship, but it followed you into marriage. And you got married, and all of a sudden you had a big fight with your spouse, and it was, it was one of those like, oh, your mom, one of those things, And you're like, where did that come from? And there was this deeply rooted insecurity that you had, and it wasn't even from your spouse, even though you're taking it out on your spouse. It came from a relationship or a series of decisions that you made in high school or college. Next week, we're going to spend most of the day actually talking about sex and spirituality and what all that looks like. But some of you, at some point or another, had a sexual relationship with someone else. Maybe for you, it was a long-term relationship. Maybe for you, it was very short-term. Maybe for you, it was a one-night stand. And all of a sudden, what happened there, you can't even fully explain it. It followed you into the next relationship. And it followed you in the next relationship. Even if you didn't have sex in the other relationships, something that happened there followed you into the next seasons of your life. And you're like, I don't even know why that is. And the reason that is what it is because the present will be your past one day for sure. But it will be present in your future. Now that's why what we're talking about is so important. Because whether you're single and you're in the room, and you're like looking and you're dating and you're having relationships, knowing that the decisions you're making now are going to affect your future and affect, your future marriage or your future, living together partner, however you're going to approach that one day, right? The way that that's going to affect that is going to be significant if you don't drill down on how you approach this right person thing now. So that's why we're really titling this message this. It's not just the right person, it's the right person myth. And somewhere along the way, you've been given a set of ideas, a set of ways of thinking about the world or thinking about the relationships that has set you up to not be fully successful in your relationships, to set you up to not be fully successful in where you ultimately want to go. And it goes something like this, right? Here's how it works. The right person myth starts with you meeting somebody, and you meet them wherever it is that you meet them. You swipe, you get on Tinder, all of a sudden you meet them, and then you go to wherever you're going to show up to. You invite your girlfriends. Come on, I know how you do this. You invite 3 girls that are sitting at other tables, and they're all like this, and they have shotguns. They're ready to go, right, just in case. You meet somebody, fellas, you go to a bar or wherever it is that you meet somebody at, and you look at her and you go, girl, what your MySpace is. I'm just kidding. You don't say that anymore. That was 10 years ago. You say whatever it is that you need to say, and all of a sudden you have a line, and maybe it was good or maybe it wasn't, and you find yourself meeting somebody that you want some sort of relationship with. You start dating. You move forward. There's a lot of like, oh my God, like whatever that is that girls do. There's the I love you. There's the I like you. There's the like, hey, whatever that is. All of those things begin in your relationship, and at some point or another, as it progresses, then in our culture now, you eventually propose, right? Now, let me ask you this. How many of you remember the days when you would propose, and all of a sudden, you didn't have to have a hashtag for it? Did anybody remember those days? Anybody remember when you proposed and you didn't have to have a video crew there? Do you remember this? Right, nowadays when their proposal happens, there is a drone that's flying over just for the moment of the proposal, Like, we're going to get down on one knee, I'm going to do this, but we'll do it again, Like, there's that sort of thing. The proposal happens, and it's a big deal, and the entire time something is fascinating that's going on in the relationship is you're looking at them when you meet and you date, and even once you're engaged, and you're saying, are you the right person? Are you the right person? Are you the right person? You get engaged, and then you start saying this. here's what I want to change, 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 right? Which is what guys love to hear, right? Here's what needs to adjust in you, whatever that is. And things begin to shift on the proposal, and then all of a sudden, you get married, right? Now the hashtag game is so much more. Now there's a photographer that costs a lot of money. Now there's all sorts of, why is there so much wood now at weddings? I don't know. There's all these wood plates. I don't know. You're eating off of the ground. You're doing all these things. And you find yourself in a situation where you're pursuing an idea that you were given from the time that you were a child. And you're pursuing happily ever after. Now, what I love about movies for the most part now is that you see like the I met you phase, then you see the dating phase, and you see the engagement phase sometimes, and then they get married, and then the movie ends. You ever notice that? It's like, I do, credits roll. But anybody who is married knows that it takes about 3.5 minutes after marriage to know that the happily ever after with this pursuit of finding the right person is in some way a myth. Like a lot of people would say this, they're not happily ever after, they are unhappily ever after. The reason that they're unhappily ever after, I won't miss this, isn't because they didn't find the right person. Like you could find the right person and still find yourself unhappily ever after. Now, again, I'm a pastor, and so I get to talk to all sorts of people when it comes to relationships, and dating, and marriages that are in trouble. And I'm not a counselor. I don't claim to be a counselor. You don't want me to be your counselor, but I will sit with you and help you move to a counselor, And almost every time that I'm talking to a couple who is married, and they're struggling in some ways in their marriage, oftentimes the phrase that gets said is this: we have a marriage problem, right? Like there's a marriage problem. Now, I'm slightly sarcastic, and by slightly I mean lots of sarcastic. And I struggle in those moments because I sit there and they're like, I have a marriage problem. I'm like, there's no such thing as really a marriage problem, right? Like when you think about marriage problems, legitimately marriage problems involve questions like this, right? Am I right? All right, real quick. Who is a under person? Where are the unders at? That's right, you're not. That's right. Now, where are my over people at? Where am I over? Come on, let's hear it. Yeah, there's the Christians. All right. So, all right. Now, this is a marriage problem. This is what causes you to have marriage issues. Is it over or is it under? That is a marriage problem, right? That's a marriage problem. My wife and I got married. We dated for like 7.5 years. I still don't know. It was a long time. We dated for a long time, and we knew so much about each other. And then we got married, right? And when we got married, one of the first things that we learned about each other, like within the first maybe week or two, I don't even know, it was pretty quick, is I always wear shoes in the house. I just don't not wear shoes. So I'm like, hey, there's onesie pajamas, and I have tennis shoes on over the one. I always have on shoes. The only time I take off my shoes at our house is if I'm watching a movie and there's carpet that's really thick. Do you know what I'm talking about? And then I rub my feet on the carpet because that is awesome, right? So that's what I do. And now here's what's interesting about our marriage. The other side of this is, part of the reason I do that is because my feet are perfect. I don't like to brag about it, but it's just true. My feet are better than your baby's bottom. That's just true. They're incredible, and partly because I always wear shoes. Now, when we got married about a week into this, we're watching a movie. I take off my shoes, which surprised my wife. I'm rubbing my feet on the carpet, and she starts making this dry heaving noise. You know what I'm talking about? She likens it to like rubbing a towel on your teeth. Like that's like the worst thing in the world for her. Some of you are like, okay, that's all right. And all of a sudden, we ran into our first marriage problem. That is a marriage problem. Now, if you are struggling in your marriage, it's not because of that. If you're struggling in your marriage, it's because of this. People with problems who get married end up having the problems in marriage. Now, here's what I mean by that. Is you came to your marriage with a certain level of baggage and struggle and daddy issues and problems, and you brought all that to your marriage. And then you married the right person, and the right person shows up in the marriage with their own baggage, issues, struggles, and then all of a sudden, don't miss it, it's not about the toilet paper. It's about the people problems that you brought to the marriage, and all of a sudden you have a fight. And then you have a fight, and you look at him or her, and you go, who are you? And they're like, this is who I've been the whole time. And what's happening is this friction that's caused not by a marriage problem. It's caused by a people problem. Now, those of you who are single, this is extraordinarily important to understand because it means this, that you could find the right person and bring all of your junk or baggage to the relationship or to the marriage one day. And all of a sudden discover that you still have all of the friction and problems anyway. Now for us, what I want to talk about is framing this idea in a different way. I don't want you just to focus on finding the right person. Today is all about understanding that we need to become the right person, because there is a stark difference between the two. You could spend the better part of your adolescent and adult life searching for the right person. But if you have not worked on becoming the right person, it's not going to matter anyway. Brad Pitt could walk in the room on that motorcycle thing that he rode in the Benjamin Button movie in the leather jacket and be everything you never knew you always wanted, and still you bring your junk to that moment and it does not work. That was really graphic. Finding the right person is so different than becoming the right person. In fact, we say it this way, that finding the right person without first becoming the right person is a recipe for an unhappily ever after ending. And so I want to leave you with two questions before we jump into the text that we're going to look at. And there's one question that's going to be just for those of you who are single people, dating people. Where are you at real quick? Now you're scared. I know. Right? I'm scared too, right? Right? And then those of you who are married, where are you at? All right, here we go. So for those of you who are single, here's the question that we're going to launch from. The question is this. Are you who the person you are looking for is looking for? Now let me say that slower because that's kind of convoluted. But it matters. Are you the person you are looking for is looking for? If you are single, dating, want to be dating, hello girl, what's your MySpace, whatever that is, wherever you are on that spectrum, if you could focus on not finding the right person, but becoming the right person, it's going to change the course and the trajectory of your relationships and your life in the future. Now, for all of you who are married, this one's for you. You ready? And it's cheesy, but we'll do this together. Are you the spouse you wouldn't want to live without? Now think about this for a second. You could walk into marriage and you could point to them and say, here's my fix list for you. Some of you got married with the idea of a fixer-upper kind of mentality. You can go into marriage like that. But you're never going to solve the problems that keep coming out in your relationship. And don't miss this. Until you focus inwardly on becoming an irresistible spouse for your wife or your husband. Now, that's not just a sexual thing. That's not just a, what does he say, all glammed up thing. That's not what that is. This is with every part of you, knowing the person that you're married to so well, loving them enough to serve them so well, that you are working on you in the relationship. That's what it looks like. Now, to get after this, I want to look at a few passages in the New Testament. The New Testament is written by several different authors. One of the primary authors in the New Testament is a guy named Paul. Paul is fascinating in that he was one of the most educated and articulate men of his time. He was a brilliant, brilliant writer. And when he writes in the New Testament, you find these moments of like incredible theological thought, but then you also find these moments of extraordinary practical thought. And he wraps a lot of these ideas within the context of what love looks like, but not necessarily in what love looks like in terms of trying to find the right person. In fact, if you were to look through the Bible, or you to look through the New Testament, or if you were to look through the Old Testament, what you're going to find isn't a lot of passages that are focused at helping you find the right person. In fact, as you look through the text of the Bible, what you're going to find is a lot of passages that are focused on helping you to become someone. And what Paul does, and what I want to share with you, is a list of things that he kind of begins to run down as it pertains to love. Now, this list that we're going to look at, a lot of you have probably heard at a wedding of some sort. In fact, if you came across it in your Bible, you probably would read through it pretty quickly. Some of you grew up in homes where your parents had this plastered on the bathroom somewhere. I'm not sure, like it was in your house, and you read that, and you're like, of course I don't disagree with those things. But there's something about it when you pause and look at it trait by trait. And when you look at the original text that it was written in, all of a sudden these words begin to illuminate the kind of life that God has called us to live. So Paul writes within the context of what love looks like, and he writes in a way where he's calling us to both prepare and practice, whether we're in a relationship or not when it comes to these things. So here's the list that he gives in Scripture, and it starts with this phrase. Love is, what's that word? Patient. Love is patient. Now, I love that he starts here. He could have started in really any way that he wanted to. But the fact that he chooses patience is incredible. Now, do we have any Brad Paisley fans in the room? Any country music fans? All 7 of us. That's great. Brad Paisley has a song called Waiting on a Woman. Anybody ever heard the song, Waiting on a Woman? I love it. Now, whenever I see this love is patient, that's where my mind tends to go. Like, I'm going to wait on that. But that's not really the context that he's focused on. Maybe a part of it, but not fully. Paul is writing in that we need to be patient when it comes to the people in our lives, specifically the significant others, and when it comes to loving others. Patient in their development, patient in their change, patient in who they are becoming. That it's not just about waiting. It's bigger than that. It's broader than that. It's that you love so fully and so selflessly that you are there through the journey. Now, one of my favorite ways to think about this, especially if you're single and you're not in a relationship, is patience is not something you stumble into. Like, I maybe have met 3 people that were born patient, and all of them are a little crazy, you know? Patience is something that you develop. Patience is something that you work on. For those of you who are married in the room, patience is something that you wake up and decide that you're going to be. Patience isn't just a trait that you get. It's not something that you can just pray for and it happens. In fact, if you just pray for it, typically what I've seen is that God then puts you at the DMV for 6 hours. And then he works that out of you. Because patience is something that is developed in an individual. And when it comes to the context of love, Paul talks about this in a way where he says, you are on a journey of love with the person that you're with. Now, the second one is a fun word that I don't think we use enough. He says this, love is patient, and he says love is kind. Now, kind is interesting because it's this idea of being considerate of another person's needs. It's that I'm going to put the other person ahead of myself. If you're dating, a great way to figure this out in somebody, and I love this, is you go out to eat with them, and you watch how they treat the waitress, you know? Or you go get fast food at Wendy's after they've messed up your order 3 or 4 times in a row, and you go, you know what? How do you handle that? Are you kind in the moments when you're frustrated? Because those of us who are married know this, that there are moments in marriage when it's not all love songs and pretty. And when the bottom falls out, the tension happens and the struggle happens. Kindness is a virtue that we all need. How do you respond to somebody when they've hurt you deeply? Kindness is the fuel for that relationship moving forward. Now, one of my favorite movies is a movie called About Time. It's about this kid whose family, or this teenager whose family is, like, they have this time traveling sort of thing. And his dad is actually at his wedding, and he has this incredible quote. He's talking about his son. So the father's talking about his son to the people that are there. And he says, we all get old and tell the same tales too many times. But then he says this, but try and marry someone who is kind. And I love that. Now, the why around that is because the bottom will fall out in your relationship. Struggles will happen in your marriage and in your relationships with people. But that kindness that is developed, that intentional choice to move yourself to the back of the line and other people's needs ahead of yours, is what's going to fuel the relationship forward. So Paul only really gives these kind of 2 things right off the bat to focus on in love. And then he gives these the love does not kind of statements. And these are often really fun for me to look at. And it's easy to pass over, but when you look at what he's saying, it's powerful. He says this, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, and it is not proud. Now, I love this. It does not envy, it doesn't boast, and it is not proud. Now, envy is an interesting one, especially when you're in a relationship with somebody else. Because oftentimes when we think we're in a relationship with somebody, we don't envy them. But I dated Emily for, we dated, again, about 7.5 years, about, I think, 4.5 years into it. One of my dreams was to work at this church in Atlanta, and it was, it's a great church. It's kind of, I'm a dork, so my dream was to work at a church. It was great. And so I was so excited about this. But Emily actually beat me there because she's a much bigger deal than me, right? So she started working at this church long before I did. And she's working in this middle school ministry department. I was a middle school pastor in Knoxville. And the envy thing kind of showed its head in a really big way. What they would do is they would contract me to come down, and they had a bunch of people that spoke, and they had this massive kind of board on the wall. And they had these note cards with all the speaker's name on it so they could keep up with it. So Emily would sit in the meetings, both where they chose it and where they would evaluate it. And her maiden name was Chenoweth. And so she calls me up one day. She goes, hey, I just want to let you know, excited. I think, you're coming to speak in a few weeks. This is great. She goes, and we put your name on the board. Oh, it's so funny. They put your name up as Mr. Chenoweth. You ever had that moment when your wife is laughing and you're like, I don't understand what's funny? Yeah. And I was quiet on the phone for a second, and she's like, she's laughing. And I'm going, I don't understand why that's funny, It had nothing to do with the Mr. Chenoweth thing. It had everything to do with my girlfriend at the time. It's a bigger deal than me. And she's still a bigger deal than me. And I thought to myself, that's not love. Like, after I pulled the car over and stopped sweating, I was like, that's not something I want in our relationship. How do I rid my heart of that kind of crap? Because that's the kind of stuff that builds and grows and struggles. Now, if you're single and you're dating somebody, this is fascinating because you ever met somebody who's like a one-upper in the story? Like you're telling this amazing story about how you saw a sunset camping, and you're like, oh, that's great. I actually fought a bear last time I went, Like one of those people. Like every time you have a story, they just have another story, kind of thing. If you're dating somebody that's constantly one-upping you, they probably are envious and don't know it. And you probably don't need to be dating them. Because that's going to show itself in other ways. The other one is boasting, right? When it comes to boasting, it's like, who do you talk most about? Are you most focused on you, or are you focused on the other people? Ladies, come on, I want to say this. You want somebody who's going to ask you questions about you over and over and over, constantly ask you questions. And not the kind of questions like, what's your favorite color? But asking you, that's a great question, but asking you about who you are. They're getting after your heart. That they're not trying to name drop the entire time you're there. That's not what you're looking for. In marriage, come on. If you come home every day and just talk about all of the great things that you did, or all the bad things you did, I talk about all the I struggle with this, and this. And I'm not trying to boast, but I'm like, I worked this out. Are you proud of me? That kind of thing. Let's focus on me. How do I focus on the other person? The last one is proud. Now, proud is an interesting one because oftentimes we assume that it's the opposite of humility. And in some ways, I guess that's true, but pride is different, especially in the context of relationships. Pride is this acknowledgement of weakness and brokenness that's in all of us. We have a friend named Justin and his wife, and they said one of the most major turning points in their whole marriage is when they discovered, and it sounds weird to say out loud, but when they discovered that they are two broken people in covenant with one another. Fellas, if you haven't been vulnerable with your spouse in a long time, and not like, oh, I'm a little bit insecure about this, but like truly vulnerable with who you are and what you currently are struggling with, you're probably deep down struggling with pride. That I'm going to hide my weaknesses behind whatever facade I put here. But here's what I'm going to tell you. When you open that door up and let other people see that, people that are in your inner circle, your spouse, your loved ones, that's where intimacy is found. When you can not only be fully known, but feel fearless as you're known. That's what Paul's getting after in this context. And what he says next is probably my favorite part of the passage, and it's partly my favorite part of the passage because I'm a little bit of a dork. I'm going to teach you a new word. The New Testament, the way that Paul writes, he wrote in Greek, and the word that he uses here, when you read over it, can be quickly missed if you don't dive into it in the way that he talks about it. It says this. It says, it does not, being love does not dishonor others. Now, I love this so much. Because right in the middle of Paul's kind of discourse on what love should look like, he inserts this extraordinarily strong word. Now, we use the word dishonor, and that's like, ooh, we don't talk about that enough. But the Greek word for this is something I want to show you. Now, let's look at this real quick. The Greek word for this is incredibly important to look at, and we're going to say it together. It's pronounced this way. Oshemeneo. Can we say that together? Oshemeneo. All right, everything you got on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Oshemeneo. That's so good. Now, here's what it is. Right? This is a way of looking at dishonor in a very different way than we do in our Western culture. But he's saying this. He says this. It does not behave disgracefully, dishonorably, or indecently. Now, here's the point that I want to make with what Paul's word is. I don't miss this. For some of you, you wouldn't say this out loud, this is actually the goal of your date. Some of you are dating, and at the end of it, at the point or at the head of it, here's what, you have a very clear picture of where it's going at the end of the night. And it is in the direction of disgracefully, dishonorably, or indecently. Now, here's how I know that. Because you don't go around parading to people that you actually respect what your goal is at the end of the night, do you? You never walk into a person who really cares about you and is your mentor and say, hey, here's what we're going to try to do at the end of this evening. That's not what you do. And here's how I also know that. You don't open up the date by saying, hey, here's my 3-step plan, and I'm going to drop you off, and then I'm going to give you this space. Don't do that. It won't work, right? And then we're going to do this. You don't do that. You wouldn't do that because it would not be good, right? You don't do that. But for some of you, this is the goal of your dating. And it's not only the goal of your, evening date. This is the goal of your relationship in general. You are pursuing something that is dishonoring to the person that you're with. And deep down, you know that, but at the same time, you have desires, you have appetites, you have this whole thing that's leading you in a direction. Now, for those of you who are married, you do this, but you do this in different ways as well. Some of you are dishonorable to your spouse in the words that you say when they are not in the room. And you think that they don't know, but they can feel it and they know. Some of you do it with sarcasm with your spouse. You dishonor them over and over and over again. And I would say when it comes to the idea of honor, there's really no place for it in most any other arena of your life. But when it comes to marriage, when it comes to relationship, and when it comes to spouses, right? Honor is an extremely big deal. You need to honor those that you love. And fellas, I'm going to tell you this, and I'm sure women do this too, but I'm not a woman, and wouldn't even know how you began to do this. But fellas, let me tell you this. If the end point of your goal is in some way dishonoring to the person that you're dating, here's why it matters. It's going to be a problem for you in your future because that does stay with you. It follows you into the rest of your relationships. Intimacy is fueled by exclusivity. We're going to talk about this so much next week. Intimacy is fueled by exclusivity. And that will follow you throughout your relationships. And if that doesn't convince you, that's okay. Let me put it to you a different way. I want you to imagine this for a second. I want you to imagine for a minute, if every person in this room, every person in Traverse City, every person in our world, imagine if you lived your life in a way where you weren't a part of someone else's regret story. Now think about that for a second. Imagine if every person in this room lived their life in a way where they weren't a part of somebody else's regret story. Some of you can point back to college, you can point back to high school, you can point back to these areas of your life, and you know that you're a part of someone else's regret story. Some of you right now in your marriage have been living or are currently living or are flirting with living in a way where your spouse is going to tell a story about you one day that feels like this angst or regret around it. And here's what I would tell you, and I know it sounds odd, and, pastor guy talking about this, I know. Here's what I would tell you. You don't have to live that way. You get to live a completely different way. And to experience God's best, it takes discipline and understanding that you will go above and beyond to honor the people in your life that matter most. Now, I'm going to give you an example of this, and this is not because I'm all like got it together, because I certainly don't, but my mom drilled this principle into me from the time I was a kid. Now, I'll tell you, I opened the door for Emily, and let me tell you why. It's not necessarily about Emily. It's because I want something in my heart to remind me on a daily basis that I honor my wife. Now, do you need to open the door? That's for you and your spouse. You figure that out. I'm going to tell you this. I think we all need a daily reminder of some way that we honor our relationships in our life. And that is practice and it's discipline. All right, we'll come back to that next week. So, Paul goes on, he says, do not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It puts the other person ahead of the other person, right? And he says this, it's not easily angered. He talks about this. And then one of my favorite parts of the passage is, and probably the most difficult, is he says this. It keeps no record of wrongs. There is no list that pops up 6 years later in a fight that you have ammunition for now. It keeps no record of wrongs. One of the best ways I think single people can prepare for marriage is to practice forgiveness over and over and over again. Because everybody who's married, again, tell me if I'm right, marriage is a lot about forgiveness, isn't it? And you don't have to be in a relationship to practice forgiveness. Now, Paul goes on, he says several other things. I'd love for you to read that on your own. But I think the insight to his text is this, that none of this comes naturally to us. None of us necessarily wake up in the morning and are patient like that. We work at it. We strive for it. We become that through discipline and practicing. For those of you who are single in the room, I think this is a discipline and a preparation that you make before you're married. And I'll tell you this, if you do that, you're going to experience a life that so many other people never get to experience because they simply aren't prepared walking in a marriage. Those of you who are sitting here and you're married and you're like, here's the angst and the brokenness, Paul's words and the traits that he talks about. When applied, prepared for, and you're disciplined at, going to reshape our marriage. Now he ends this particular section with some powerful words about how we approach the whole framework. And he says this in just one paragraph. He says, when I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, or when I became an adult, I put the ways of childhood behind me. That's the foundation of this whole series. The foundation of this is that you put the ways of childhood away. That you put aside the I'm just going to try to find the right person, and you begin to say, I'm going to step into maturity and focus on becoming the right person. Who is it that you're becoming? Now, a lot of this kind of material comes from a guy named Andy Stanley. He has a great book on this. It's actually called The New Rules of Love, Sex, and Dating. You should read it. It's fantastic. The question that he came up with is the question that I gave you earlier. And the action step for you, I think, is similar around this as well. For those of you who are single, here's the action step. You need to become the person that you are looking for is looking for. And then those of you who are married, it's become the spouse that you wouldn't want to live without. Become the person that you're looking for is looking for. Become the spouse that you would not ever want to live without. Now, we're going to wrap up in a second, but I wanted to tell you, like, personally how I work on this. There's 3 particular things that I've kind of worked to apply that I kind of struggle to apply constantly, but we really work hard at it. And I want to share these with you. The first one is this. I think you have to develop a set of personal core values. Now, this is not mine. This is Stephen Covey writes about this in the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Phenomenal book, but he talks about beginning with the end in mind. Fast forwarding all the way to your funeral, and it's morbid, but then going, what do you hope people say about you at your funeral? What are the values that you embody as an individual at that point in your life? What do you hope people line up and thank you for? So somebody told me this, I believe it was around my freshman year of college. And I wanted to get away and really work on it. And so somebody let me use their cabin. So this is, I think it was 19 or 20 at the time. I went out into the middle of nowhere in this incredible cabin, and I spent 3 days trying to come up with these traits or adjectives that I wanted to be said about me one day. Because I wanted to be very clear. Here's the win for my life, And so I'm overachiever, type A, and extraordinarily introverted. So all of that combination led to about 150 words, right? So it was not great, But over the course of that 3 days, I worked at it. I began to think about it in terms of where my weaknesses were and how my personality could lead me to struggle in some of those areas. And I whittled it down. I walked away from those 3 days with about 15 words. And then for the next 3 to 4 weeks, what I did in my kind of personal time in the mornings, I just began to whittle that 15 down to what are the 7 words that could shape my life. I'll tell you one of them, and I won't tell you all, but I'll tell you one of them. One of them was approachability. Again, I'm the most introverted person that you have ever met. I went to a wedding yesterday. A guy walked up to me that I didn't know, and I saw him coming. I was like, oh, you want to talk to me? Oh, you're going to feel uncomfortable in about 11 seconds, Because I'm just kind of awkward, And we were talking. It was great. It was a great conversation. But I knew that I wanted to be approachable to people. I wanted my son to come to me and feel like I was approachable. I want my wife to feel like I'm always approachable. I want people that I don't know to always feel like I'm approachable. But because of my personality bent, that's not always easy, So I had to work at that. I think you've got to figure out what those personal core values are for you within the context of what your personality is, and that's going to help shape you. If you're married, I think you should get away individually and work on that and do that. If you're single, this is one of the greatest gifts that you could ever give your spouse one day, is knowing what those are for you and being able to communicate those to someone else. The second one is this. I think you need to have a vision for marriage. Now, I don't think this is like in a really pithy statement that you just come up with that feels good and it's like, oh, it's a vision. I think you need to figure out what you want your marriage to feel like before you ever get married. Now, when Emily and I first started dating, we didn't sit down with a bunch of statements and say this is how it should be, but we really tried to focus in on how do we want it to feel in our relationship. And what we began to do is we began to have conversations about it. And so I figured I would just tell you kind of in real time in our relationship how this functions. And so this past week, of course, as I'm studying for a relationship series, we had one of our bigger fights that we've had in a while, discussions that we've had in a while. And it was almost 100% my fault. Because I had expectations that we hadn't communicated, and it was kind of one of those things. I was mad. You're just like, and I wasn't even mad at her. I was just mad. I was mad that I hadn't been able to solve it. I hadn't been able to fix it, and I'm just angsty the whole day and short answers, and it just wasn't great. And so I was frustrated, then she was frustrated, and then we had a little guy that didn't understand what was happening, so I think he was frustrated. So that night, we're both frustrated at each other. But a commitment that we made when we first started dating was that we weren't going to go to bed without kind of getting towards the root of the emotional thing. Right? Now, we're certainly not perfect. There's a lot of areas that, we work on stuff all the time. But this is one of those areas that we just said we were going to prioritize. And so a few nights ago, I think it was Friday night, we both went to bed, and in the midst of one of our bigger discussions, fights, we were able to say, I love you to each other and actually feel that before we went to bed. Now, it took us, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. We went to bed, right? We got there. We didn't solve the problem, but we got there. And so the next morning we wake up and our little guy is not feeling good. And so we ended up taking him to the ER. And so not the ER, we went to the urgent care. So we ended up at the urgent care. And so we're both still frustrated with each other. This is my favorite part of it. We're both still frustrated with each other. We get to the doctor's office. And then we got the happy old guy doctor. You ever seen he's just happy of the world. He's just, got, old man glad. It's the best thing ever. And he's all happy, and we're both frustrated. And when you have somebody that's happy and you're both frustrated, you just want to be like, I need you to simmer down. I need you to calm yourself. And he's all happy, and then he leaves the room, and Emily apologizes. And I'm like, in my head, why are you apologizing? It's on me. And I apologize. And then emotionally, we got there even further, and then we decided to go to a Mexican restaurant and solve the whole thing over queso, right? Now, here's the beauty in that. And here's what I'm thankful for. The ability to be able to do that isn't because we're great at marriage. It's because when we were dating, we disciplined ourselves on that one idea about the emotional side of that being taken care of. There's a lady in our church, I won't say her name because I didn't ask permission, but they've been married a long, 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 long time. Long, long, long time. And she talks about how when she gets frustrated or they get frustrated with each other, she says, I remind myself over and over again that I choose him. So powerful. I choose him. Predetermined, I choose him. That's a vision for marriage. I think if you're single, you got to figure that out. And if you're married and you haven't figured it out yet, you need to figure out what those things are that fuel your marriage. And the last one is this. I think everybody needs a mentor couple. You need somebody who's a few steps ahead of you in whatever area that you're in that can help guide you through that. Now, one great thing about Kensington is we have a bunch of married couples here that are mentors. They're there during the most difficult times. They're there during the parts where you're like, don't even know that you need it. And then they're there during the times where you're just kind of trying to figure out how to do it. They're actually all out in the lobby today, which I'm excited about. You can meet them if you'd like to talk to them. But I think everybody needs some people who are further along than they are. When we were engaged, I had a couple that I focused on that were a couple years into marriage. At this point, we have couples that we're focused on that are a few steps ahead of us, and we try to meet with them. So I think no matter where you are in that journey, you need a mentor couple that's going to come alongside you and help you navigate that. So again, I want to put this up here so that we're all clear on what the bottom line is. You need to become the person that you are looking for if you're single. And then if you're married, you need to become the spouse that you wouldn't want to live without. So here's how we're going to wrap up our time. I'd love for you to stand up for a second. I'm not going to have you do anything weird, but I'd love for you to stand up for a second. Stretch out. We covered a lot of content. Go ahead. If you want to hug your spouse right now, I just set you up for that win. There you go. All right. Now I'd like for you to look at me for just a second. I want to talk to those of you who are married just for a minute. And then I'm going to talk to you who are single, so get ready. But if you're married in this room, you probably showed up today thinking we were about to talk to high schoolers about sex, which is great. Tricked ya. It's hard being married. It's joyful being married. But you will not do what God has called you to do in your marriage unless you're focused on it and disciplined with it. Right? Now, I love you. So you show up here. I really do. We've been praying all week. We actually pray over every seat, because we pray for you. And our prayer for you this week, for those of you who are married, was simple. It's that you would choose intentionality in your marriage so that you can thrive in it. Because I believe that God wants you to thrive in it. But as long as you're pointing outward or you're pursuing are they the right person, or here's my fix list, or, you need to do this, you're going to always struggle. But the minute that you turn inward and decide to become that person, you're going to experience a level of freedom that you never knew that you could experience in your marriage. Some of you are here today, and you're on the fringe, and you're smiling, and you're great, and you come in, and it's church, you drop your kids off, it's a great thing, but you're on the fringe. And you grasping, some of you are here, and you're we're grasping at one other shot. This is one of our last shots. What I want you to grasp for is becoming someone. Not trying to fix them, but becoming someone. And loving the way that Paul talks about. And you can't do that on your own. You can't. You can get better at it. You can apply these principles and get better, but you can't do that by yourself. If you're not a follower of Jesus in the room, I'm really glad that you're here. I really am. And that you endured a love, sex, and dating talk, and you don't even love Jesus. That's great. Seriously. That's props to you for listening to me speak that long. I'll just tell you this. Here this week, if you come back next week, I hope you do. Just know that you can apply these things. It's going to be helpful. But experiencing the life that God really wants for you, if he's up there, kind of thing, it requires you to be dependent on Jesus. And the last thing I'll tell you, if you're married couples, is you don't know how many people are looking at you to do this well. If you have kids in the room, you're teaching your kids right now how to treat their spouse one day and what marriage looks like. It matters that you're intentional about it. All right. All my single people. Oh, the single ladies. All right, here we go. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I won't ever do that again, I promise. Here's what I'm going to tell you if you're single. The angst, as I talk to single people, is she out there? Is he out there? Am I going to find them? And there's no great answer to that. If anybody gives you a promising answer to that, there's not a great answer. They're lying to you. Slap them, But here's what I will tell you. Most of your friends are going to focus on finding the right person. But if you will choose to focus on becoming the right person, I promise you this, your life will shift and your life will change. in a positive and powerful way. And what I find more times than not is that when we choose to do that, when we choose to become that, oftentimes the right person we're looking at, as we're focused on doing that, ends up showing up along the way. It's a weird thing. I don't know how that works. We change the perspective. Oftentimes, that's the case. Do not settle. Do not run into marriage without figuring some of these things out, and really focus on yourself as an individual. So typically what we do is we'll end our services like with a couple of songs and that sort of thing, which is always great. But today we're going to end it a little bit different. And what I want to do is I just want to pray over you. And it might feel a little bit weird, especially if you come consistently. You're waiting on a great song, and they're great. But I just want to pray over you for a second. And then we're going to dismiss you. And then if you want to connect with a married couple here in a minute, we'd love for you to do that. Or if it's your first time, you want to learn more about it, you can do that with Starting Point. You can do all those things. But I just want to pray over you. And then we'll wrap up. Let me pray. Father, I pray for the person in this room who's not a follower of you, and they're here because somebody invited them, or they promised them lunch, or their boyfriend or girlfriend made them come, or whatever that is. Father, I pray right now that you would just help them to figure out how to apply this in their own personal way, whatever that looks like, and you would help them to navigate this well. I pray for every single person in the room that's so fixated on finding the right person and trying to discover where they are and trying to navigate that. God, I know that that is painful and difficult and stressful, and how many swipes I got to swipe, I get all that. But God, I pray for every one of them that they would focus on becoming someone first, and that you would use them in that pursuit of discipline to do something extraordinary in their hearts, so that when whoever it is that comes along, that they are inwardly focused and know who they are and are ready for it. And God, I just want to pray over every married couple in the room. God, it's hard to be married. It's difficult. There's all sorts of things around it. God, my prayer is that we would be a people who are marked by selfless love, by all of the traits that Paul lists, that we go into our daily lives fully invested and model the love for one another that you modeled for us. God, let us become the people that you call us to be. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And thank you so much for joining us. Next week we get to talk about sex, so come back. It'll be great. And we'd love you to do that. Also, on your way out, we have a mentor couples that we would love to connect you with. But we'll see you right back here next Sunday for part 2 of the new rules of love, sex, and dating.
Joining us online. Before you go, we want to snag Patrick for a second.
Hey.
We have some questions for him that pertain to this lesson, and we're so excited about it. So The first question that we have for you is, so for a single person who wants to take you up on choosing their personal core values,
Right.
what would you recommend that they start with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when it comes to figuring out your personal core values, it's so important if you're single to navigate through what are those personal guardrails for you. And so I think I said in the talk, for me, I needed to get away. I needed to get away from like technology, from everything else, and really focus on who it was that I was becoming. And I feel like you almost have to do that to really dive deep enough into your heart to navigate that. But I think when you do it, you also have to look at it in the context of where your personal kind of pitfalls are, your blind spots are. And so I think you may get a lot of words, but really tailor those words, maybe 6 to 8 words that really kind of tailor to your heart and where you need to be. But I think the first step is just deciding to do it and then getting away and being disciplined enough to do that.
That's really good. I have another question. The second one is, once a couple is dating or they're married, how do you monitor what you're becoming?
Right. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think when it comes to monitoring like your behavior in marriage, it gets harder because you're focused on each other, and then you have kids, and then you're just trying to focus on keeping the baby alive. We have young kids, and so I think that's kind of the part of that. But for us, when we were dating, actually we were engaged at the time. We both lived in Atlanta. We had different kind of treks. Emily drove about an hour and a half to work. I drove about 45 minutes to where I was at. We're always passing each other. Didn't have enough time. What we decided to do is really prioritize one night a week, and we would go get frozen yogurt. And when we would go, we would ask each other the questions about like, how do we get better at this? And one specific question that I think changed our entire relationship is we said, dinner, she would begin to ask me, how can I serve you better? What's one thing that I could do to serve you better?
That's a challenging question.
It's a tough question, yeah. And that question, we started asking each other. We still ask each other that question almost weekly. And the way that works out is a lot of times it's a simple thing, right?
Yeah.
For me, she's a graphic designer, so she's super talented. And so
super talented.
Super talented. I'm a big fan. And so I asked her to design thank you notes. Like that was my one time. She asked me, can you just get up early to take care of a little guy sometimes? He's that small. And then my favorite one that she asked me, I don't know if I can say this. It's a love, sex, and dating series. We'll go for it.
We'll go there.
Yeah, so my favorite one that she'll say is, I want a back rub that's not leading somewhere, right? So that, I said it just for you online, right? And so that's a great one for us, like just to navigate through. So we try to serve each other, and that illuminates what's happening in our hearts. So
that's awesome. I like that. Yeah. Third question, last one. So you talked a lot about dishonoring and what the Bible says about dishonoring.
Right.
What advice would you give to a person who wants to shift away from that type of behaving and dating?
That's a tough one, and a lot of you are probably there. Like some of you, you're watching online, I talk to people all the time, and that kind of is the goal, and you know that it is the goal if it's the goal. Like most
that's
people
true.
know that. And so I would say for those of you who are there, and you're like, I want to pursue it in a different way, take the approach that we're talking about today. I think the first step is just deciding that you are not going to date that way anymore, removing yourselves from some of those areas where you might
that could be super hard.
It is super hard because it oftentimes involves changing relationships or
it's
friendships.
A big
ask. It is.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to that, I would say that some of you need to take some time off from dating. And it's not that you don't need to date anymore, but it's just for a season, you need to press pause and reset your heart, reset your mind, and kind of get centered on where you need to be so that you can really experience the kind of relationship that God has for you. And so next week, we're really unpacking that idea. We're going to be talking a lot about it next week. So we'd love for you to join us.
That's
for that
awesome.
part.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for watching.
Hey, thank you guys online for watching and just taking the time to listen to all the awesome stuff we have to share. Thank you for sharing all of our stuff on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We appreciate all of that. We'll see you guys next week for our second week of Love, Sex, and Dating. See you guys.